My name is Marcus, and it started on a Friday when the fog rolled thick across the Blue Ridge Mountain. What should have been a simple weekend camping trip with my college friends turned into something that still haunts my dreams 3 years later. I'm telling you this story because I need someone to know what really happened up there, even if you don't believe it. The five of us, me, Jake, Sarah, Tommy, and Lisa, had been planning this trip for months. We were all psychology majors at the state university, and Jake had been acting strange lately. His girlfriend had just broken up with him, and he'd been obsessing over these old folklore books about Appalachian mountain curses. He kept talking about how Native American shamans used to perform rituals in these mountains, binding spirits to the land. We thought it was just his way of coping with the breakup. Sarah had been struggling too. She'd recently been diagnosed with postpartum depression after giving up a baby for adoption the year before. The doctors said the hormonal changes could last for months, sometimes years. She'd been having episodes where she'd talk to people who weren't there, conversations that seemed perfectly normal to her but terrified the rest of us. The weather forecast called for light rain, nothing unusual for October in Virginia. We packed our gear and drove up to a remote section of the George Washington National Forest, far from the main trails. Jake insisted we go to this specific location, a place his grandmother had told him about, where settlers used to disappear in the 1800s. Local folklore claimed the area was cursed, that anyone who stayed overnight would be claimed by the mountain spirits. As we hiked deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around us. Ancient oaks and maples formed a canopy so thick that even in the afternoon, everything felt dim and muffled. The rain started as a light drizzle, but within an hour, it became a steady downpour that soaked through our rain gear. That's when we found the doll. It was hanging from a tree branch about 8 feet up, tied with what looked like human hair. The doll was handmade, crude, with button eyes and a stitched mouth that seemed to be screaming. Its cloth body was stained dark with something that definitely wasn't rain. Lisa, who'd always been the brave one, wanted to take it down, but Jake grabbed her arm. "Don't touch it," he whispered. "That's a curse doll. Mountain folk used to make them to bind enemies' souls." Sarah started laughing then, a high-pitched sound that didn't match the situation. "She's beautiful," she said, staring up at the doll. "She looks just like the baby I gave away. Same little button nose." We should have turned back then. Every instinct screamed at us to leave, but something kept us moving forward. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the strange pull of the place itself. The rain grew heavier, and the path became harder to follow. Soon we realized we were lost. As darkness fell, we found what looked like an old hunting cabin, half collapsed, but still offering some shelter. Inside, we discovered more dolls, dozens of them, arranged in circles on the floor, some hanging from the rafters. They were all different, but they shared the same screaming expression, the same dark stains. Tommy, who'd been quiet most of the trip, suddenly started talking rapidly. "My uncle used to hunt up here in the 70s, he said. He told me stories about people who went missing. Families who came camping and were found weeks later arranged in circles, just like these dolls. The authorities always said it was wild animals, but Uncle Jimmy knew better. He said there was something living up here, something that collected people." Jake was examining the dolls more closely, his psychology background kicking in. "These aren't random," he said. "Look at the arrangement, it's ritualistic. Someone's been practicing sympathetic magic here. Each doll represents a person. When you harm the doll, you harm the person it represents." Sarah picked up one of the dolls, cradling it like a baby. "She's cold," she whispered. "So cold, just like my baby was when they took her away." Her postpartum symptoms were getting worse in the stress of our situation. That's when we heard the first scream. It came from outside, distant but unmistakably human. A long, agonized wail that cut through the sound of rain. We froze, listening. Then came another scream, closer this time. And another. Lisa grabbed my arm. That's not an animal, she said. Someone's out there. Jake's face had gone pale. Or something's making those sounds to lure us out. He pulled out one of his folklore books, the pages now soggy from the rain. Mountain spirits are known to mimic human voices. They call to you, make you think someone needs help then. Then what? Tommy demanded. Then they take you. The screaming continued, seeming to come from all directions now. Sometimes it sounded like a woman in distress, sometimes like a child crying. Sarah began responding to the voices, talking back as if she were having a conversation. I know, sweetie, she said to the empty air. Mommy's here now. Mommy won't leave you again. That's when I realized the truth. Sarah wasn't just experiencing postpartum depression. She was having a complete psychotic break. The stress, the isolation, the eerie atmosphere, it had all combined to push her over the edge. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night. Sometimes, when I look where she was looking, I can almost see them too. Shadowy figures that might have been tricks of the light or might have been something else entirely. The placebo effect is powerful. When you believe something strongly enough, your mind can make it real. But so is the nocebo effect, when your fears and expectations create actual physical symptoms, actual experiences of terror. As we huddled in that cabin, surrounded by those cursed dolls, our collective fear began to manifest in ways that seemed impossible. Tommy started convulsing, claiming something was inside him. Jake began speaking in a voice that wasn't his own, reciting what sounded like Latin incantations. Lisa and I tried to stay rational, but when you're surrounded by people losing their minds, rationality becomes a luxury you can't afford. Around midnight, the screaming stopped. The sudden silence was worse than the noise had been. We could hear our own breathing, our racing heartbeats, the drip of rain through the broken roof. Then Sarah stood up, still holding the doll. She wants to go home, Sarah said. She's been waiting so long to go home. Before any of us could stop her, she walked out into the storm. We found her body 3 days later, after the search and rescue team located us. She was arranged in a circle of stones about a mile from the cabin, the doll still clutched in her arms. The official cause of death was exposure, but that doesn't explain why she was positioned exactly like the dolls we'd found. It doesn't explain the expression of peace on her face, or why her lips were sewn shut with what looked like human hair. Jake had a complete mental breakdown after we were rescued. He's in a psychiatric facility now, still insisting that the mountain spirits took Sarah and left something else in her place for those final hours. Tommy developed severe PTSD and can't be in wooded areas without having panic attacks. Lisa moved across the country and refused to talk about what happened. Me? I tried to rationalize it all. Mass hysteria, I told myself. Psychological contagion. A group of stressed college students were pushed to their breaking point by a perfect storm of circumstances. Sarah's postpartum psychosis, Jake's obsession with folklore, Tommy's family trauma, our collective fear, all combined to create a shared delusion. But I kept the photographs I took on my phone that night. In most of them, you can only see what we saw with our naked eyes run-down cabin. Some crude dolls, 5 scared college students. But in 3 of the photos, there are figures in the background. Translucent, almost human shapes that seem to be watching us. I've shown these photos to experts. Some say they're just tricks of light and shadow, pareidolia, or our brain's tendency to see faces and figures in random patterns. Others aren't so sure. One folklore professor at the university studied them for weeks before handing them back with shaking hands. Sympathetic magic, he told me. The dolls aren't just representations, they're vessels. When someone with the right knowledge, the right intent, creates them in a place of power, they can bind spirits, souls, even living people. The question isn't whether what you experienced was real. The question is, what did Sarah become when she walked out into that storm? I've tried to move on. I graduated, got a job in a city far from any mountains. But sometimes, late at night, I get phone calls with no one on the other end. Sometimes I hear Sarah's voice, faint and distant, calling my name. And sometimes when I'm walking alone, I see her in my peripheral vision, standing at the edge of a parking lot or across a busy street, always holding that doll, always watching. The rational part of my mind says it's PTSD, survivor's guilt, the psychological aftermath of trauma. But the other part, the part that was in that cabin and felt something ancient and hungry stirring in the darkness, knows better. Last week I received a package with no return address. Inside was a doll that looked exactly like me, down to the scar on my left hand from a childhood accident. Its button eyes seemed to stare right through me, and its stitched mouth was curved in what might have been a smile. I burned it immediately, but the ashes reformed into the shape of a person when the wind scattered them. And now, every night, I hear footsteps on my apartment roof, slow and deliberate, pacing back and forth until dawn. They say the mountains never forget, and they never let go. I thought I escaped that night 3 years ago, but maybe escape was never an option. Maybe Sarah didn't die in those woods. Maybe she just became something else, something that's been waiting patiently for the right moment to bring the rest of us home. I'm writing this because tomorrow I'm going back to the mountains. Not because I want to, but because I have to. The compulsion is too strong to ignore now. I can feel Sarah calling to me, and I know that if I don't answer, she'll find another way to reach me. If you're reading this, and you ever find yourself in the Blue Ridge Mountains on a foggy October night, stay on the marked trails. Don't follow the voices in the darkness, no matter how familiar they sound. And if you see any dolls hanging from the trees, whatever you do, don't touch them. Some curses are real, and some mountains have very long memories. I can hear her now, standing outside my window on the fire escape, whispering my name through the glass. The doll is in her arms, and its button eyes reflect the streetlight like tiny stars. It's time to go home. At 7 years old, I thought following my mother into the wilderness of rural Montana was an adventure. The Crimson Dawn commune promised spiritual awakening, healing, and a new family bound by something deeper than blood. Now, let's move on to the next part and explore this story. Our leader, a charismatic man known only as Father Matthias, preached about ancient wisdom, energy manipulation, and the thin veil between our world and the realm of shadow. What started as my mother's search for meaning after my father's sudden death became our descent into a nightmare that would span 3 countries and nearly a decade of my childhood. The commune practiced what they called soul-threading, a blend of psychological manipulation, ritualistic ceremonies, and something far darker that I wouldn't understand until years later. My mother, desperate to communicate with my deceased father, surrendered everything to Father Matthias and his inner circle of devoted followers. They dressed us in crimson robes, gave us new names, and promised that through their rituals, the dead could speak to the living. I became known as Samuel, though my real name was buried along with my old life. As years passed, I witnessed things that no child should see. The commune's practices grew increasingly disturbing as Father Matthias claimed to channel spirits through ornate wooden dolls that seemed to watch us with glass eyes that reflected something alive and malevolent. Children began disappearing, only to return changed, hollow-eyed and speaking in voices that weren't their own. The adults explained away the strange occurrences as spiritual growth, but I knew something was terribly wrong. The dolls moved when no one was looking. Voices whispered from empty rooms, and the children who had been blessed by Father Matthias started showing signs of severe mental breakdown, talking to invisible entities, performing self-harm rituals, and displaying knowledge they couldn't possibly possess. My mother, once a rational nurse, became completely devoted to the cause, even as her own mental health deteriorated. She developed what the commune called a gift, claiming she could see and speak with spirit. But I recognized the symptoms of schizophrenia that had claimed to be my grandmother years before. The commune wasn't healing her. They were exploiting her illness. The breaking point came when I discovered that Father Matthias wasn't just manipulating vulnerable adults. He was systematically using a combination of psychological torture, sleep deprivation, and what I later learned were carefully crafted placebo and nocebo effects to control his power. The spirits speaking through the dolls were elaborate hoaxes designed to convince grieving parents that their dead children were still with them. But some things couldn't be explained away so easily. Some of the phenomena I witnessed defied rational explanation, leaving me to wonder if, in his quest for control, Father Matthias had actually opened doorways to something genuinely supernatural and hostile. This is the story of how I survived the Crimson Dawn commune, lost my childhood to a narcissistic predator who used grief as a weapon, and discovered that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who promise to save you from your pain. I still smell the jasmine incense sometimes. 23 years later, and that sweet, cloying scent can hit me on a random Tuesday morning, and I'm 7 years old again, watching my mother cry into her coffee cup, while a stranger promises to bring my father back from the dead. His name was Father Matthias, though I learned later that wasn't his real name. Nothing about him was real, but back then, sitting in that cramped grief counseling room in Billings, Montana, he seemed like salvation wrapped in a cheap brown suit. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that sickly hospital glow, while he spoke in a voice like warm honey about souls and eternal connections. "Death," he said, his pale blue eyes fixed on my mother's tear-stained face, "is simply a doorway. Your husband hasn't left you, Mrs. Patterson. He's just in another room." Mom had been broken since Dad died in that car accident 6 months earlier. She'd gone from a rational, no-nonsense emergency room nurse to someone who jumped at shadows and talked to empty chairs. The grief counselor, Dr. Martinez, had recommended this special support group that met on Thursday evenings. What she didn't know was that Father Matthias had been infiltrating these sessions for months, hunting for the perfect candidates. I remember the exact moment I knew something was wrong with him. He knelt down to my eye level, and when he smiled, his teeth were too white, too perfect, like porcelain. But it was his hands that made my skin crawl, soft and pale, with fingernails that were just a little too long for a man. They reminded me of something, though I couldn't place what. "And you must be David," he said, though neither my mother nor I had introduced ourselves. "Your father speaks of you often." The room suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Dr. Martinez looked confused, shuffling through her papers. I wanted to ask how he knew my name, but Mom gasped and grabbed his hands like he'd just performed a miracle. He speaks to you," she whispered. Father Matthias nodded gravely. "The spirits of the departed seek connection with those they love. Your husband has been trying to reach you, but the veil between worlds is thick here in the city. Too much interference from all the artificial light and noise." He gestured vaguely at the fluorescent bulbs. "But in nature, in places of power, the connection becomes clearer." That's when he told us about the Crimson Dawn commune in rural Montana. A place where families could heal together, where the barrier between life and death grew thin enough for real communication. He painted a picture of spiritual awakening, of children growing up connected to ancient wisdom, of a community that understood grief as a doorway rather than an ending. What he didn't mention were the wooden dolls. I only saw them for a moment as we left that night, when Father Matthias opened his briefcase to retrieve a pamphlet about the commune. Nestled among his papers were 3 small carved figures, each about the size of my hand. Their faces were grotesquely detailed, with glass eyes that seemed to track movement. One had long black hair made from what looked like real human strands. Another was painted in red ochre with symbols carved into its chest. The third one was staring directly at me. I blinked, sure I was imagining things, but when I looked again, Its tiny wooden head had definitely turned. Father Matthias noticed me staring and quickly closed the briefcase. "Family heirlooms," he said with that porcelain smile. "Very old, very powerful." Mom didn't see any of it. She was too busy reading the pamphlet, tears streaming down her face as she absorbed descriptions of spiritual channeling sessions and communion with departed souls. By the time we got home, she'd already decided we were going. I tried to talk her out of it. At 7, I didn't have the words to explain why every instinct in my body was screaming danger. But I knew something was fundamentally wrong with Father Matthias. The way he moved was too fluid, like he was performing every gesture instead of just existing. The way he spoke about my father, using details that felt both accurate and slightly off, like someone had given him a script but he'd memorized it imperfectly. But Mom was beyond reason. That night I heard her on the phone with Father Matthias for over 2 hours, her voice getting higher and more excited as he fed her exactly what she needed to hear. He told her that Dad was worried about us, that he missed us, that he had important messages to share about our future. He described Dad's voice perfectly, that slight rasp from years of smoking, and knew about Dad's habit of humming old country songs when he was thinking. How could he know these things unless Richard is really speaking to him? Mom asked me the next morning, her eyes bright with hope for the first time in months. I couldn't answer that. I was 7 years old and didn't understand manipulation tactics or cold reading techniques. I just knew that when Father Matthias mentioned Dad's humming, something metallic and wrong had crept into his voice, like he was tasting the words before speaking them. 2 weeks later, we sold everything we owned. Mom quit her job at the hospital, cashed out Dad's life insurance, and bought us one-way bus tickets to a place called Crimson Falls, Montana. Population, 127. The bus ride took 14 hours. Mom spent most of it staring out the window, occasionally whispering to herself. I thought she was praying, but when I listened closer, I realized she was having a conversation. Her side of a conversation. "I know, honey," she'd murmur. "We're coming. David's excited to see you too." The landscape outside grew emptier and more desolate with each mile. Rolling hills gave way to dense forests that seemed to swallow the horizon. By the time we reached Crimson Falls, the sun was setting behind mountains that looked like broken teeth against the orange sky. Father Matthias was waiting for us at the bus depot, which was really just a bench next to a gas station. He wore the same brown suit, but now I noticed details that had escaped me before. His shoes were expensive leather, polished to a mirror shine that seemed out of place in this dusty little town. His watch was gold, heavy and ornate. For someone who preached about spiritual poverty and detachment from material things, he certainly dressed well. "Welcome home," he said, embracing my mother like they were old friends. When he turned to me, I smelled something underneath his cologne, something organic and sweet, like flowers left too long in water. The commune was another 40 minutes up a winding dirt road that disappeared into the forest. No cell phone service, no power lines visible anywhere. Just trees and shadows and the occasional glimpse of mountains in the distance. Father Matthias drove while explaining the community's basic rules and philosophies, but I wasn't listening. I was watching the trees blur past the window and wondering why every bird we passed was flying away from where we were headed. It was fully dark when we finally arrived at Crimson Dawn. The compound consisted of a main building that looked like an old hunting lodge, surrounded by smaller cabins scattered through the trees. Everything was lit by oil lamps and candles, giving the whole place an amber glow that should have been welcoming but somehow felt ominous. "No electricity," Father Matthias explained as he helped us with our bags. "It interferes with spiritual frequencies. You'll find that without all the artificial noise of modern life, you'll begin to hear things you never noticed before." He was right about that, though not in the way he meant. As we walked toward the main building, I could hear voices coming from somewhere deeper in the woods. Not talking voices, singing voices. A low harmonic chant that seemed to rise and fall with the wind. "Evening meditation," Father Matthias said when he noticed me listening. The community gathers every night to strengthen our connection with the spirit world. Tomorrow you'll join them." That's when I saw the dolls again. They were arranged on a shelf just inside the main building's entrance. Dozens of them, all different sizes and styles. Some looked like they'd been carved recently, their wood still pale and rotted. Others were clearly ancient, their surfaces darkened with age and handling. All of them had those same glass eyes that seemed to follow movement. "Our spirit vessels," Father Matthias said, noticing my stare. "Each one houses the essence of a departed soul who chooses to stay close to the living world. They help facilitate communication during our ceremonies." One of the dolls, a small female figure with intricate braided hair, turned its head slightly as we passed. I know it moved. I know it did. But when I looked directly at it, it was facing forward again, perfectly still. Father Matthias smiled at my expression. "Don't worry, David. They're friends. Soon you'll understand exactly how special they are." As he led us deeper into the building, past rooms filled with adults in red robes, who smiled too widely, and children who stared without blinking, I felt a cold certainty settle in my stomach. We weren't joining a spiritual community. We were walking into a trap, and somewhere in those woods, in voices that sounded like my father but couldn't possibly be him, the evening meditation was calling our names. The first thing they did was take our clothes. "Worldly possessions carry negative energy," explained Sister Ruth, a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back so tightly it stretched her features into a permanent expression of surprise. She handed us bundles of red fabric while Father Matthias watched from the doorway, his pale eyes reflecting the candlelight like an animal's. The robes were coarse cotton, dyed a deep crimson that reminded me uncomfortably of dried blood. They smelled like incense and something else, something organic that made my nose wrinkle. Later, I'd learned that smell was sage mixed with what the commune called sacred herbs, though I suspect now it was something designed to make us more compliant. "These will be your new skin," Sister Ruth said as she helped Mom tie the rope belt around her waist. "Red is the color of life force, of connection to the eternal. When you wear these robes, you become part of something greater than yourself." I hated mine immediately. The fabric was rough against my skin, and it was too long, dragging on the ground when I walked. But Mom seemed transformed by hers. She stood straighter, smiled wider, and when she looked at me, there was a light in her eyes that had been missing since Dad died. "Don't we look wonderful, Samuel?" she said. I froze. "My name is David." Sister Ruth's smile never wavered. "Your old name belonged to your old life. Here you'll be called Samuel, after the prophet who could speak with spirits. Your mother has chosen the name Martha, after the woman who welcomed Christ into her home." The casual erasure of our identities should have been a massive red flag, but Mom just nodded along like this was perfectly reasonable. "Samuel," she repeated, testing the sound. "I like it. It feels spiritual." They gave us a cabin about 100 yards from the main building, nestled between two enormous pine trees that blocked out most of the sky. It was sparse inside, 2 beds, a wooden table, a basin for washing. No mirrors, I noticed. No books, except for a leather-bound journal they called a spiritual diary where we were supposed to record our daily insights and any messages we received from the spirit world. "Dinner is communal," Sister Ruth explained as she lit the oil lamp on our table. "Everyone eats together in the main hall. Afterwards, we have evening meditation where you'll be introduced to the practice of spirit communication." That first dinner was surreal. About 30 adults and maybe a dozen children, all dressed in identical red robes, sitting at long wooden tables in a room lit only by candles. The conversation was stilted, artificial, everyone speaking in the same calm, measured tones about spiritual growth and eternal connections. I sat between Mom and a boy who looked about my age. He had dark hair and hollow eyes, and when I whispered my name to him, he just stared at me for a long moment before saying, "I'm Joshua. I've been here for 3 years." 3 years? I whispered back. Don't you miss your old home? His expression didn't change. This is my home, the only one that matters. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. It was like listening to a recording of a child's voice rather than an actual child speaking. The food was simple: vegetable soup, bread, water from mason jars. As we ate, Father Matthias stood at the head of the room and spoke about the evening's meditation. He explained that the commune practiced what he called receptive channeling, where they opened themselves to communication from spirits who had messages for the living. Tonight, he said, his voice carrying easily through the silent room, we have new family members joining us. Martha and Samuel will participate in their first communion with the departed. A murmur of excitement rippled through the adults. The children remained silent, but I noticed several of them glancing at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe. Or fear. After dinner, we were led to a room I hadn't seen before, located in the basement of the main building. The ceiling was low, supported by rough wooden beams, and the walls were lined with more of those carved dolls. Dozens of them, their glass eyes glittering in the flickering candlelight. The room smelled like old flowers and something else, something sweet and cloying that made me slightly nauseous. Oil lamps hung from the beams, casting dancing shadows that made the dolls appear to move even when I wasn't looking directly at them. Everyone sat in a circle on cushions arranged around a low wooden table. On the table were several of the larger dolls, including the 3 I'd seen in Father Matthias's briefcase. Back in Billings, they were positioned so they seemed to be looking at the center of the circle, where an ornate wooden box sat open, revealing red velvet interior. The spirit vessels, Father Matthias explained as we took our places, contain the essence of souls who have chosen to remain close to our world. They serve as conduits, allowing us to communicate across the veil of death. He picked up one of the dolls, the one with long black hair that looked disturbingly real in the lamplight. This vessel houses the spirit of a young woman named Elena, who died tragically over a century ago. She often brings messages from recently departed souls who are still learning to navigate the spirit realm. As he spoke, I could swear the doll's glass eyes were looking directly at me, not just facing my direction, actually looking at me, with an intelligence that made every hair on my arm stand up. Now, Father Matthias continued, we'll begin with breathing exercises to open our receptive channels. What followed was 20 minutes of guided meditation that felt more like hypnosis. Father Matthias's voice took on a rhythmic, almost musical quality as he led us through visualization exercises designed to make us receptive to spiritual communication. The combination of his hypnotic voice, the flickering lights, and whatever herbs they'd been burning in the incense burners made me feel disconnected from my body, like I was floating just above my own skin. That's when the doll started talking. It was Elena's voice, soft, feminine, with a slight accent I couldn't place. But the sound was coming from the wooden figure Father Matthias held, its carved mouth moving slightly as words emerged. I bring greetings from the spirit realm, the voice said. There are souls here who wish to speak with their loved ones in the living world. Several adults gasped. Mom grabbed my hand so tightly her nails dug into my palm. Richard Patterson, the voice continued, and Mom let out a sob. Your husband wishes you to know that he is safe and at peace. He has messages for both you and your son. The rational part of my brain, the part that wasn't clouded by herbs and hypnotic suggestion, knew this was fate. The voice was too clear, too perfectly positioned. It had to be some kind of ventriloquism or hidden speaker. But as Elena's spirit supposedly channeled my father's words, describing private moments and personal details that no stranger should have known, doubt began creeping in. Tell Martha, the voice said, now sounding eerily like Dad's familiar rasp, that I know about the insurance money. Tell her I want her to use it to heal, to find peace. And tell Samuel that I'm proud of him for being brave. I'm demanding all. Mom was crying openly now, completely convinced she was hearing from her dead husband, but something about the message felt wrong to me. Dad never called me brave. That wasn't his style. He would have said I was tough or a good kid, but never brave. It was a small detail, but it stood out like a wrong note in an otherwise perfect performance. The session continued for another hour with various dolls supposedly channeling different spirits. Some brought messages for other commune members. Others just shared general wisdom about the nature of death and spiritual growth. But it was the final message that made my blood run cold. Elena's voice returned, but this time she was speaking directly to me. Samuel, the doll said, its glass eyes fixed on mine. Your father wants you to know that you have a gift. You can see things others cannot. Soon, you'll understand what that means. Everyone was staring at me now. Father Matthias looked particularly interested, his pale blue eyes studying my face like he was searching for something specific. What kind of gift? I managed to ask. The doll's head tilted slightly, a movement so subtle I might have imagined it, but the adults around the circle murmured in amazement. You'll know when the time comes, Elena's voice replied. But be careful, child. Not all spirits are friendly. Some have been waiting a very long time to find someone who can truly see them. The candles flickered suddenly, all at once, as if blown by a wind that shouldn't have existed in that windowless basement room. In that moment of dancing shadows, I could have sworn I saw something move in my peripheral vision. Something tall and dark, standing just outside the circle of light. When the flame steadied, Father Matthias was smiling at me with an expression that made my skin crawl. Welcome to the family, Samuel, he said. I think you're going to be very special indeed. As we filed out of the basement and back to our cabin, Mom chattering excitedly about hearing from Dad, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed during that ceremony. Not just Mom's renewed hope or my own growing unease about the commune. Something had noticed me. Something that had been waiting in the shadows between the dolls and the flickering candles, watching for a child who could see things others cannot. And as I lay in my narrow bed that night, listening to Mom whisper prayers of gratitude to her dead husband, I could hear them whispering back. By the third week, Mom was talking to Dad every morning. Not during ceremonies or meditation sessions, just casual conversations while she got dressed or prepared our meager breakfast. She'd ask him about the weather, tell him about her dreams, even argue with him about whether I was eating enough vegetables. Richard says you need more protein, she'd announce, spooning an extra portion of lentils onto my plate. Growing boys need proper nutrition. The terrifying part wasn't that she was talking to empty air. It was that sometimes if I listened very carefully, I could hear something talking back. Not Dad's voice, something else. Something that had learned to mimic his cadence and speech patterns, but got the details slightly wrong. It would use words Dad never used, reference things he never cared about, laugh at jokes he never would have found funny. But Mom was too desperate to notice the discrepancies. The commune's daily routine was designed to break down our sense of individual identity. We woke before dawn for morning contemplation, a period of silent meditation in the main hall while Father Matthias read from what he called the Book of Eternal Wisdom, a leather-bound volume that looked ancient but was probably printed last year. After that came communal breakfast, followed by work assignments. Adults tended the gardens, maintained the buildings, or worked in what they called the craft workshop, where they made the wooden dolls that served as spirit vessels. Children had lessons, not regular school subjects, but instruction in spiritual sensitivity and receptive meditation. Basically, they were teaching us to be better conduits for whatever voices wanted to speak through us. The teacher was Sister Angela, a thin woman in her 30s who'd supposedly been with the commune since its founding 5 years earlier. She had the same hollow-eyed look as some of the children, and when she spoke about spiritual communication, her voice took on the same flat, artificial quality I'd noticed in Joshua. The gift of spirit sight, she explained to our small class of 7 children, is rare and precious. Most adults have closed themselves off to the subtle energies that surround us, but children are naturally more receptive. Your minds are still open to possibilities. We sat cross-legged on woven mats in a room on the 2nd floor of the main building, surrounded by more of those carved dolls. Each child had been assigned a spirit guide, a particular doll that was supposed to help them develop their psychic abilities. Mine was a small male figure with intricate symbols carved into its chest and eyes that seemed particularly alert. "Samuel," Sister Angela said, holding up my assigned doll, "your guide is named Tobias. He was a young man who died in a fire many years ago, but he chose to remain close to our world to help children like yourself develop their gifts." The doll's wooden face was expertly carved, with features that looked almost lifelike. But there was something wrong with the proportions. The eyes were slightly too large, the mouth a little too wide, giving it an expression that was meant to be friendly, but came across as predatory. "Hold Tobias during our meditation," Sister Angela continued, "and listen to his voice." I didn't want to touch the thing. Every instinct in my body was screaming that it was dangerous, but refusing would have drawn unwanted attention. So, I took Tobias in my hands, surprised by how warm the wood felt despite the cool morning air. The meditation began with breathing exercises, then progressed to visualization techniques designed to open our spiritual channels. Sister Angela's voice grew increasingly hypnotic as she guided us through imaginary journeys to sacred places where the veil between worlds was thin. That's when I felt it, a slight vibration in the wooden doll, like a cell phone set to silent. At first I thought I was imagining it, but the sensation grew stronger, accompanied by a faint whisper that seemed to come from inside the carved figure. "Hello, Samuel," the voice murmured, so quietly I had to strain to hear it. "I've been waiting to meet you." My eyes snapped open, breaking the meditation. Sister Angela was watching me intently, and several of the other children had turned to stare. The doll in my hands was perfectly still, but I could swear I felt it breathing. "Did Tobias speak to you?" Sister Angela asked, her voice tight with excitement. I wanted to lie, to say I hadn't heard anything, but the words stuck in my throat. Because the truth was I'd heard something. Maybe not from the doll itself, but from somewhere. And that possibility was more terrifying than any rational explanation. I'm not sure," I managed. Sister Angela smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The first contact is always uncertain. It will become clearer with practice. Over the following days, the meditation sessions intensified. We spent longer periods holding our assigned dolls, listening for messages, sharing whatever we heard with the group. Some children reported elaborate conversations with their spirit guides. Others claimed to receive prophetic visions about future events. I tried to resist, to tune out whatever whispers seemed to emanate from Tobias, but it became increasingly difficult. The voice was persistent, patient, always waiting for moments when my guard was down to slip in little comments or observations. "You don't trust the adults here," it murmured during one session. "That's smart. They're not telling you everything." "Your mother's getting sicker," it whispered another time. "The medicine they're giving her isn't helping. It's making things worse." That last comment hit too close to home. Mom's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. She'd started having conversations with Dad at all hours of the day and night, often becoming agitated when he supposedly disagreed with her decisions. She was losing weight, sleeping poorly, and developing nervous tics I'd never seen before. When I mentioned this during one of our private moments, she brushed off my concerns. "I'm fine, Samuel," she insisted, but her hands were shaking as she said it. "Richard is helping me understand things I never saw before. The spirit world is so much more complex than I realized." That's when I met Emma. She was about my age, with curly red hair and freckles, and unlike the other commune children, she still seemed to have some spark of individuality left. She approached me after breakfast one morning, glancing around to make sure the adults weren't watching. "You're new," she said quietly. "Want to see something cool?" Before I could answer, she grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the woods behind the cabins. We walked for maybe 10 minutes along a narrow trail before she stopped at a small clearing where someone had built a circle of stones around a fire pit. "This is my secret place," Emma explained. "The adults don't know about it. Sometimes I come here when I need to think." "Think about what?" She gave me a look that was far too old for her 8-year-old face. "About what's really happening here. About why kids keep disappearing." My blood went cold. "What do you mean, disappearing?" Emma sat down on one of the larger stones and motioned for me to join her. "Kids come to the commune with their families, stay for a few months, then just leave. At least that's what the adults say. But I've been here for 2 years, and I've noticed things." "What kind of things?" "Like how Marcus came back differently after his solo meditation retreat. Or how Sarah started speaking in voices that weren't hers before she supposedly went to live with relatives in Canada. Or how some of the older spirit dolls have hair that looks exactly like kids who used to be here." I thought about the doll with long black hair I'd seen in Father Matthias's briefcase, and suddenly the organic smell that clung to everything in the commune took on a more sinister meaning. "You think—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Emma nodded grimly. "I think they're not just talking to spirits. I think they're making them." Before I could process what she'd said, we heard voices coming through the trees. Adult voices, calling our names with the kind of forced cheerfulness that barely concealed anger. "We have to go back," Emma whispered urgently. "But, Samuel, be careful. Don't let them know you're paying attention. And whatever you do, don't trust the dolls, no matter what voices you hear coming from them." As we hurried back toward the compound, I couldn't shake the image of those carved figures lined up in the basement meditation room, their glass eyes reflecting candlelight like living things trapped in wooden bodies. That night, I dreamed about my father, but in the dream his face was wrong, stretched and distorted like it had been carved from wood by someone who had only heard him described secondhand. He opened his mouth to speak, but instead of his voice, I heard something else, something ancient and hungry. "Soon," it whispered. "Very soon you'll understand everything." I woke up clutching Tobias in my hands, though I was certain I'd left the doll in the meditation room. Its wooden face seemed to be smiling in the pre-dawn darkness, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I saw something moving behind his glass eyes. Something that was definitely not my father, but had been learning to sound like him. The day I found Father Matthias's collection room was the day I stopped being a child. It happened by accident. I was looking for a bathroom during evening meditation. The basement room where we held ceremonies was stifling, thick with incense and the body heat of 30 people sitting too close together. Sister Ruth had given me permission to step out, warning me to be quick and quiet. The main building was different at night. Shadows pooled in corners where the oil lamps couldn't reach, and every creak of the old wooden floors sounded amplified in the silence. I'd been upstairs before for lessons, but never at night, never alone. The bathroom I usually used was occupied, so I ventured further down the hall, past rooms I'd never seen before. Most were locked, but one door stood slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of warm lamplight within. I should have kept walking, should have found another bathroom or just held it until the ceremony ended. But something about that room called to me, maybe the whisper of familiar voices from inside, or maybe just the desperate curiosity of a child trapped in an increasingly insane situation. I pushed the door open just wide enough to peer inside. The room was Father Matthias's private study, larger than our entire cabin and furnished with expensive antiques that seemed wildly out of place in our supposedly humble spiritual community. Persian rugs covered polished hardwood floors. Oil paintings in gilt frames depicted religious scenes that looked European and very old. A massive oak desk dominated the center of the room, its surface covered with papers, photographs, and several of the smaller spirit dolls. But it was the walls that made my breath catch in my throat. They were lined floor to ceiling with photographs. Hundreds of them, all showing the same thing: families, parents and children, all wearing expressions of desperate hope, all dressed in the red robes of commune members. Some photos were recent, the colors still vivid. Others had faded to sepia tones that suggested they were decades old. And underneath each photograph was a small wooden doll. I recognized some of the faces immediately. The Hendersons, who'd supposedly left 3 months ago to start a new life in Oregon. Little Amy Sullivan, who'd gone to live with her grandmother in Florida, according to Sister Ruth. Marcus Whitman, who'd returned from his solo retreat, changed and hollow-eyed before vanishing entirely just 2 weeks later. They were all there, immortalized in photographs with their corresponding dolls arranged beneath like museum specimens. Magnificent, isn't it? I spun around to find Father Matthias standing in the doorway, his pale blue eyes reflecting the lamplight like a nocturnal animal's. He wasn't angry at my intrusion. If anything, he seemed pleased, like I'd passed some kind of test by finding this room. Each family represents years of careful cultivation, he continued, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. Months of research, relationship building, and psychological preparation. You can't simply approach random people and expect them to surrender their children to a spiritual cause. You have to find the right candidates, the desperate ones, the broken ones, the ones who want so badly to believe in something greater than themselves that they'll ignore every warning. I tried to back away, but my legs felt like water. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't seem to move. Father Matthias approached his desk and picked up one of the dolls, a small female figure with intricate braided hair. "Sarah Martinez," he said fondly, examining the carved face. Her parents brought her here after she survived a house fire that killed her younger brother. Such guilt, such desperate need for redemption. Sarah was convinced she could have saved him, you see. When I told her parents that their son's spirit was trapped between worlds and needed Sarah's help to cross over, they practically threw their daughter at me. He set Sarah's doll back on the desk and selected another, a boy with dark hair and hollow wooden eyes. Marcus Whitman. His father was a war veteran suffering from severe PTSD. The family was falling apart, the marriage crumbling under the weight of trauma and addiction. When I suggested that Marcus had inherited his father's spiritual sensitivity and could help heal the family's generational wounds through communion with warrior spirits, they saw it as salvation. The casual way he discussed these children's lives, like they were objects he'd collected rather than human beings, made my stomach turn, but I couldn't look away from the photographs. Couldn't stop counting the faces of families who'd trusted this man with their most precious possessions. The beauty of the system, Father Matthias continued, settling into the leather chair behind his desk, is that it's entirely self-sustaining. The parents want so desperately to believe their children are special, are chosen, that they'll rationalize away any evidence to the contrary. He smiled, and his 2 white teeth gleamed in the lamplight. Well, children are remarkably adaptable, with the right combination of isolation, suggestion, and chemical enhancement. They can be convinced of almost anything. Chemical enhancement. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Father Matthias's smile widened. The herbs we burn during meditation aren't just for ambient Samuel. Certain botanical compounds can enhance suggestibility, create mild hallucinatory states, even induce temporary dissociative episodes. Nothing harmful, of course. We're not monsters. Just enough to make the children more receptive to spiritual experience. He opened a drawer in his desk and withdrew a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. As he flipped through it, I caught glimpses of handwritten notes, sketches of ritual circles, and what looked like chemical formulas. Every family requires a customized approach, he explained. Your mother, for instance, was a particularly elegant case study. Recent trauma, existing mental health vulnerabilities, a desperate need to maintain connection with her deceased spouse. Classic grief manipulation, enhanced by carefully crafted evidence of spiritual communication. My blood went cold. Evidence? Oh, Samuel, Father Matthias chuckled. Surely you didn't think those spirit voices were actually supernatural? I've been studying with your family for months. Hospital records are surprisingly easy to access when you know the right people. Your mother's colleagues were more than happy to share stories about her home life, her marriage, her struggles after your father's death. Every message from beyond was careful. The room seemed to tilt around me as the implications sank in. The intimate details about Dad, the perfect mimicry of his voice, the specific memories only our family should have known. It was all fake. Manufactured. A con game played on a grieving widow by a predator who fed on desperation. But the dolls. I managed to whisper. Father Matthias's expression grew more serious. Ah, yes. The dolls are rather special, aren't they? You see, Samuel, while the voices are artificially produced through hidden speakers and careful ventriloquism, the dolls themselves are authentically haunted, you might say. He stood and walked to one of the wall displays, stopping in front of a photograph of a girl with long black hair. Beneath it sat the doll I'd first seen in his briefcase, Elena, with her two real hair and glass eyes that seemed to track movement. Each doll contains a piece of its original owner, he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Hair, usually, sometimes fingernails, occasionally, in special cases, blood mixed into the wood stain. The families think it's a memorial, a way to keep their departed children close. They don't realize they're creating genuine conduits for, let's call them residual energies. I felt a bile rise in my throat. You mean they're really dead? Oh yes, Samuel. Very dead. The families that come here, they don't leave. Not intact anyway. The parents are easier to dispose of. Adults can be quite fragile when their entire worldview collapses. A few strategic pushes towards self-destructive behavior, and they often eliminate themselves. But the children... He ran his finger along Elena's carved cheek with disturbing tenderness. The children become part of the collection. The room was spinning now, and I gripped the doorframe to keep from falling. Every doll on those shelves represented a murdered child. Every photograph showed a family that had been destroyed by the man standing calmly before me, discussing their deaths like he was cataloging butterflies. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. Father Matthias turned back to me, and his pale blue eyes were now completely devoid of the artificial warmth he usually projected. Because you're different, Samuel. You actually can see things others cannot. Not because of any supernatural gift, that's just the lie I tell the parents. But because you're naturally resistant to suggestion, naturally suspicious of authority. Most children your age would have been completely converted by now, but you keep fighting the programming. He moved closer, and I caught that sweet floral scent again. Stronger now, cloying and nauseating. That makes you valuable, he continued. The other children here, they're useful as vessels, as conduits for the various psychological experiments I conduct. But you could be a partner. Someone who understands the truth behind the illusion and helps maintain it. Never, I managed to choke out. Father Matthias shrugged. We'll see. Your mother's condition is deteriorating rapidly, you know. The combination of grief, psychoactive herbs, and psychological manipulation is pushing her toward a complete break from reality. Soon she'll be completely dependent on the commune for survival. And when that happens, what do you think will become of you? I didn't answer, but he didn't seem to expect me to. The choice is simple, he said. Become my apprentice, help me refine the techniques I use to collect families, and I'll ensure your mother receives the care she needs. Refuse and, well, let's just say accidents happen with disturbing frequency at spiritual communities, especially to children who ask too many questions." Before I could respond, voices from downstairs indicated that the evening meditation was ending. Father Matthias moved to his desk and began organizing papers, suddenly all business. "Think about my offer, Samuel," he said, without looking up. "But don't take too long. Your mother's psychological state is quite fragile, and I'd hate for something unfortunate to happen while you're making up your mind." I stumbled out of that room and somehow made it back to our cabin without anyone noticing my absence. Mom was already there, sitting on her bed and talking animatedly to the empty air beside her. "Richard says the meditation was particularly powerful tonight," she said when she saw me. "He could feel the spiritual energy building towards something important." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what Father Matthias had seen. The weight loss, the tremor in her hands, the way her eyes couldn't quite focus on anything in the real world anymore. She was disappearing into the fantasy Father Matthias had constructed for her, and I was powerless to stop it. That night I lay awake listening to her whispered conversations with ghosts, while outside our window, something moved between the trees. Something tall and patient, watching our cabin with eyes that reflected the moonlight like polished glass. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of Elena's doll turning its head to follow my movement, its carved mouth opening to speak with the voice of a little girl who had trusted the wrong adult with her life. "Help us," she whispered in the dream, "before he adds you to the collection." I woke up with Tobias in my hands again, his wooden face seeming to smile in the pre-dawn darkness. But this time I noticed something I'd missed before, a small hole drilled into the back of his head, just large enough for a tiny speaker. The voices weren't coming from the spirits of dead children. They were coming from Father Matthias, somewhere in the darkness, watching and listening and pulling our strings like we were just another set of dolls in his collection. 3 days after I discovered Father Matthias's collection room, Emma disappeared. Sister Ruth announced it during morning contemplation, her voice carefully neutral as she explained that Emma had been chosen for a special spiritual retreat to help her develop her growing psychic abilities. She would be gone for an indefinite period, communing with nature spirits in a sacred grove deeper in the forest. But I knew the truth. Emma had asked too many questions, noticed too many patterns, and now she was going to become another photograph on Father Matthias's wall. I had to find her. The problem was, I had no idea where to look. The commune's property stretched for hundreds of acres into dense Montana wilderness, and I'd never ventured beyond the immediate area around the main buildings. But I remembered Emma mentioning her secret clearing, the stone circle where she went to think. If Father Matthias was holding her somewhere, maybe I could find clues there. I waited until afternoon rest period, when most adults were napping, and the children were supposed to be meditating in their cabins. Mom was deep in one of her conversations with Dad's spirit, muttering responses to questions only she could hear, so she didn't notice when I slipped out. The trail to Emma's clearing was harder to find in daylight, but I eventually spotted the broken branch she'd used as a marker. The woods were eerily quiet, no bird songs, no insect sounds, just the whisper of wind through pine needles and the distant sound of something large moving through the underbrush. When I reached the stone circle, I found evidence that someone had been there recently. The fire pit contained fresh ashes, and there were scuff marks in the dirt that looked like they'd been made by someone struggling. But it was what I found hidden behind one of the larger stones that made my blood freeze. Emma's red robe, torn and stained with something dark. She put up quite a fight, a familiar voice said behind me. I spun around to find Father Matthias emerging from the tree line, no longer wearing his usual benevolent smile. In the filtered forest light, his pale features looked almost corpse-like, and his two blue eyes held a coldness that made my skin crawl. "I was hoping you'd come looking for her," he continued, stepping into the stone circle. It saves me the trouble of finding an excuse to separate you from the others." I tried to run, but two other figures stepped out from behind the trees. Brother Paul and Brother David, two of Father Matthias's most devoted followers. They moved with the same artificial grace I'd noticed in the commune leader, like they were performing choreographed movements rather than just walking. "Emma is fine," Father Matthias said as the two men closed off my escape routes. "For now, she's experiencing what we call the purification process, an intensive spiritual therapy designed to help resistant subjects overcome their attachment to worldly skepticism." "Where is she?" I demanded, my voice cracking with fear and rage. "Safe, secure, learning to embrace the truth about her spiritual destiny." Father Matthias pulled something from his pocket, a small wooden figure I recognized immediately. It was Emma's assigned spirit guide, carved to look like a young girl with curly hair. "Soon she'll join our collection permanently, unless, of course, you'd like to take her place." The casual way he discussed Emma's fate, like he was negotiating the price of livestock, made something snap inside me. I lunged at him, fists swinging wildly, but Brother Paul caught me easily and pinned my arms behind my back. "Such passion," Father Matthias observed. "Such dedication to protecting your friend. These are admirable qualities, Samuel, but they need to be properly channeled." They dragged me deeper into the woods, along trails I'd never seen before, past landmarks that seemed designed to disorient anyone trying to retrace the route. After what felt like hours of walking, we reached a structure I hadn't known existed. A concrete bunker built into a hillside, camouflaged by decades of moss and vegetation growth. "Our special meditation facility," Father Matthias explained as Brother David produced a set of keys, "where we conduct intensive spiritual therapy for subjects who require additional guidance." The interior was nothing like the rustic commune buildings. This was clinical, sterile, with fluorescent lights that hurt my eyes after hours of forest shadows. The walls were lined with small cells, each containing a narrow cot and a bucket. Most were empty, but from one came the sound of quiet crying. "Emma? Emma," I called out. "Samuel?" Her voice was barely recognizable, hoarse, broken, terrified. "Samuel, don't let them put you in the machines." Machines. I looked around, noticing for the first time the electronic equipment humming in the corners. Speakers, recording devices, and something that looked like medical monitoring equipment. The purification process involves several stages, Father Matthias explained as they forced me toward an empty cell. First, isolation and sensory deprivation to break down psychological defenses. Then, carefully controlled exposure to audiovisual stimuli designed to induce desired behavioral changes. Finally, chemical therapy to ensure long-term compliance. They shoved me into a cell and slammed the door. The space was barely large enough to lie down, with walls of unpainted concrete that seemed to absorb sound. A single bulb provided harsh white light that I couldn't turn off. The first phase typically lasts 72 hours, Father Matthias said through the small barred window in the door. No food, minimal water, constant illumination. It's remarkable how quickly the human mind begins to break down under such conditions. By the end of the third day, most subjects are eager to embrace whatever new reality we provide. He disappeared, leaving me alone with my terror and the sound of Emma's quiet sobbing from somewhere nearby. The next 3 days were a descent into a nightmare. True to his word, Father Matthias provided almost no food or water, just enough to keep me conscious but too little to maintain any real strength. The constant light made sleep impossible, and the concrete walls seemed to press in closer with each passing hour. But the worst part was the sounds. It started on the second day, whispers coming through the walls, so faint I couldn't tell if they were real or hallucinations brought on by sleep deprivation. At first they seemed random, meaningless syllables that might have been wind through the ventilation system. But gradually they became more coherent, more personal. "Samuel," the voices whispered. "Poor Samuel. Your mother doesn't love you anymore. She only loves her dead husband. Samuel," they continued, "your father is disappointed in you. He's ashamed that his son is so weak, so frightened." The voices knew things they shouldn't have known. Childhood fears, secret shames, private thoughts I'd never shared with anyone. They spoke with the voices of people I trusted, people I loved, telling me terrible truths about myself in tones of profound disappointment. By the third day, I was having full conversations with people who weren't there. My father appeared in the corner of the cell, shaking his head sadly as he explained all the ways I'd failed him. My mother materialized beside my cot, weeping over what a burden I'd become. Even Emma's voice joined the chorus, blaming me for her capture, for not being smart enough to save us both. I knew it wasn't real. Some rational part of my mind understood that I was experiencing psychological torture designed to break down my sense of self. But knowing something intellectually and resisting it emotionally are very different things. With each passing hour, the line between reality and hallucination blurred a little more. On the fourth day, Father Matthias returned. I was curled in the corner of my cell, talking to a vision of my grandmother who'd been dead for 3 years. She was explaining how disappointed the entire family was in my behavior when the cell door opened, and Father Matthias stepped inside. In the real world, he looked smaller than I remembered, less imposing. But after 3 days of sensory deprivation and psychological assault, he seemed to radiate an almost supernatural authority. "How are we feeling, Samuel?" he asked, settling into a folding chair someone had brought for him. I tried to answer, but my voice came out as a croak. My throat was raw from talking to hallucinations, and my lips were cracked from dehydration. "The first phase of purification can be quite intense," he continued sympathetically. "Your mind is learning to release its attachment to false beliefs about reality. Soon you'll be ready to embrace a clearer understanding of your place in the world." He produced a water bottle and held it just out of reach. The sight of it made my mouth water painfully. "I can make all the unpleasant voices stop," he said softly. "I can bring you food, clean clothes, and a comfortable bed. All you have to do is accept your role as my apprentice, help me guide other families toward spiritual enlightenment, and I'll ensure you never experience this kind of suffering again." The water bottle was so close I could smell the condensation on its surface. My body screamed for hydration, for relief from the constant psychological assault. It would be so easy to give in, to let Father Matthias transform me into another hollow-eyed disciple who smiled too widely and spoke in artificial tones. But then I heard Emma's real voice from somewhere nearby. Not the disappointed, accusing version from my hallucinations, but her actual voice, weakened but still defiant. "Don't trust him, Samuel," she called out. "Remember what we talked about. Remember what's really happening here." Father Matthias's expression hardened. "Emma requires additional therapy, I'm afraid. Her resistance to treatment has been quite troublesome." He stood to leave, taking the water bottle with him, but paused at the door. "I'll return tomorrow, Samuel. By then, I expect you'll be more receptive to reasonable conversation. The alternative is considerably less pleasant." As his footsteps faded down the corridor, I heard new sounds through the walls. Electronic humming, the whir of machinery starting up, and from Emma's cell, a scream that cut through the concrete like a knife. The machines Father Matthias used were designed to induce what psychologists call learned helplessness, a state where the subject becomes so overwhelmed by inescapable punishment that they stop trying to resist altogether. For the next several hours, I listened to Emma's muffled cries as whatever devices he'd installed subjected her to experiences I couldn't imagine. When the sounds finally stopped, the silence was somehow worse than the screaming. "Emma?" I called out, my voice barely audible. No response. "Emma, please answer me." Still nothing. I pressed my ear to the wall, straining to hear any sign that she was still alive. Finally, after what felt like hours, I heard the faintest whisper. "Samuel?" Her voice was different now, flatter, more distant. "Samuel, it's okay. Father Matthias is right. We need to stop fighting. We need to accept our gifts." My blood went cold. Whatever they'd done to her in that room, it had worked. Emma, brave, defiant Emma, who tried to warn me about the commune's true nature, was gone. In her place was another hollow-eyed disciple, ready to smile and nod and help Father Matthias collect the next batch of victims. As I huddled in my concrete cell, listening to my friend speak in the artificial tones of the truly broken, I realized that Father Matthias had been right about one thing. The choice was simple: become his apprentice or become another doll in his collection. But he'd made one crucial mistake in his psychological torture. By forcing me to confront the truth about what he was doing, to Emma, to my mother, to all the families who'd trusted him with their desperation, he'd stripped away my last illusions about the commune. I knew exactly what kind of monster I was dealing with. And monsters, I was learning, could be killed. The Montana soil was softer than I expected when my bare feet hit it that night. I'd slipped out through the kitchen window, not the front door, not the back door, but through the narrow gap above the sink where the wood had warped from years of steam and neglect. The commune's main building stood behind me, its windows glowing amber in the darkness, while ahead lay the tree line that had always felt like a wall keeping us trapped. I wasn't trying to escape. Not really. I was following Emma. She'd appeared at my bedside around midnight, her pale nightgown rustling as she gestured for me to follow. Her lips hadn't moved, but somehow I'd understood. "Come see what Father Matthias doesn't want you to know." The forest floor crunched under my feet, dried pine needles and something that felt suspiciously like small bones. Emma stayed just ahead, her white gown catching moonlight that seemed too bright, too cold. She led me deeper than any of us children had ever been allowed to go, past the meditation clearings and the herb gardens, into territory that felt ancient and wrong. That's when I smelled it. Sweet decay, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. Emma stopped beside a cluster of pine trees that formed a natural circle. The ground here was different, too even, too rectangular. My stomach dropped as I realized what I was looking at. Graves. Unmarked but unmistakably graves. At least 6 of them, maybe more. "The ones who asked too many questions," Emma whispered, her voice carrying an echo that made my teeth ache. "The ones who tried to leave." I knelt and pressed my palm to the nearest mound. The earth felt warm, which made no sense in the October cold. Something metallic caught the moonlight near the base of a tree. A small name tag, the kind they give you in hospitals. Michael Torres, age 8, Torres. My hands shook as I found another. Linda Chen, age 34 to Hyundai. Then another. David Morrison, age 12 Bice. Dr. Chen's daughter, I breathed, remembering the broken woman who helped Father Matthias with his ceremonies. She's been looking for Linda for 3 years. Emma's face twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Dr. Chen knows. She's always known. Why do you think she helps him?" The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. Dr. Chen hadn't joined the commune to find her daughter. She joined because Father Matthias had a daughter, and the only way to stay close to Linda's body was to become complicit in his crimes. "Your father knew," Emma continued, circling the graves like she was performing some ritual. "He was asking questions about the other communes, about the missing families. That's why." "Stop, Dot." My voice cracked. "My father died in a car accident." Emma tilted her head, and in the moonlight, I could see through her. Actually, see through her, like she was made of fog and memory. Car accidents are easy to arrange when you have devoted followers. A little something in the brake fluid, a curve taken too fast. The forest spun around me. I pressed my palms against my eyes, but the images kept coming. My father's twisted car, The funeral I wasn't allowed to attend, my mother's sudden obsession with contacting the dead. Father Matthias hadn't found us by chance. He'd been watching, waiting for the perfect moment to swoop in and collect 2 more broken souls for his collection. He killed my father, I whispered, and your mother knows. Emma's voice was fading, becoming part of the wind through the trees. Deep down, past all the medication and manipulation, she knows. That's why she's breaking. I stumbled backward, crashed into something solid. Not a tree, a person. Dr. Chen stood behind me, her face gaunt in the moonlight, medical bag clutched in her white-knuckled grip. You shouldn't be here, Samuel. Her voice was professionally calm, but her eyes were those of a woman who'd seen too much. The dead should rest. Where's Emma? I spun around, but the girl in white was gone. Only empty graves and the smell of rotting flowers. Dr. Chen studied my face with clinical interest. When did Emma first start talking to you? 3 months ago, when she arrived with her family from... There's no Emma. Dr. Chen's words hit me like physical blows. There never was. Emma Chen died 6 months before you arrived here. She was my daughter. The ground tilted beneath my feet. Every conversation, every shared secret, every moment of companionship I'd felt in this nightmare place, none of it had been real. Emma was either a hallucination born from isolation and trauma, or something far worse. The mind creates what it needs to survive, Dr. Chen continued, her voice taking on the detached tone she used during Father Matthias's sessions. Sometimes that's multiple personalities. Sometimes it's conversations with the dead. And sometimes... She paused, studying my face. Sometimes the dead actually answer back. A scream shattered the night air, coming in the direction of the commune. Then another. Dr. Chen grabbed my arm with fingers that felt like ice. We need to get back. Now. Father Matthias has decided it's time for the final ceremony. The main hall had been transformed. Every doll from Father Matthias's collection now sat in a perfect circle around the room's perimeter, their glass eyes reflecting the light from dozens of black candles. The smell hit me first, burning hair mixed with something sweet and cloying, like meat left too long in summer heat. All the families sat in the center of the circle, adults and children separated into 2 groups. My mother knelt with the other parents, their red robes making them look like drops of blood against the wooden floor. The children, there were only 8 of us left, sat cross-legged facing our parent. I noticed Marcus wasn't among us. Neither was the girl who'd arrived last month, the one who used to cry for her grandmother. Father Matthias stood at the head of the circle, wearing robes so deep red they appeared black in the candlelight. His usually perfect hair hung loose around his shoulders, and his eyes held the fevered gleam of a man who'd finally decided to drop all pretense. My children, he began, his voice carrying that hypnotic quality that had drawn so many broken families to him. Tonight we completed the great work. Tonight, the veil between worlds doesn't just thin, it tears completely. Through the tall windows, I could see police cars surrounding the building, their red and blue lights strobing through the glass. But Father Matthias seemed unconcerned. If anything, the approaching sirens made him smile wider. They think they can stop what we've begun, he continued, gesturing toward the windows. They don't understand that we've moved beyond their earthly laws. We serve higher masters now. One of the dolls, a Victorian-era porcelain, thing with real human hair, slowly turned its head to look at me. Not quickly, not with the jerky motion you'd expect from hidden mechanisms. Slowly, smoothly, as if it were considering me with actual consciousness. My mother started laughing. Not the hollow, medicated chuckle I'd grown used to, but genuine, unhinged laughter that made the hair on my arms stand up. "He's here," she gasped between fits of giggles. "David's here. He's so angry about what you did to him." Father Matthias's smile faltered for just a moment. The spirits are strong tonight, Rebecca. But we must channel them properly. You killed him. My mother's voice shifted, deepened, taking on an inflection I hadn't heard since I was 7 years old. You poisoned his brake fluid and watched him die, you sick bastard. The temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my breath now, and frost began forming on the windows despite the October warmth outside. The doll's eyes seemed to glow brighter, and I realized that what I'd mistaken for reflecting candlelight was something else entirely. Father Matthias raised his hands, trying to regain control. The ceremony requires focus. Every candle in the room went out simultaneously. In the darkness, I heard a movement. Not the rustle of people shifting nervously, but the soft whisper of fabric and the gentle clicking of porcelain limbs. The dolls were moving. All of them. Emergency lightning kicked in, harsh fluorescent bulbs that revealed a scene from a nightmare. The dolls had left their positions around the room's perimeter and were advancing on the circle of people. They moved with purpose, their tiny hands reaching toward the adults with something like hunger. Dr. Chen was screaming, not in fear, but in recognition. Linda, baby, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. One of the smaller dolls, a child-sized thing with blonde ringlets, had climbed into her lap and was pressing tiny porcelain hands against her face. As I watched in horror, Dr. Chen's screams turned to sobs of relief. I can feel her, she whispered. She forgives me. She forgives. The doll's hands pressed harder, and Dr. Chen's sobs cut off with a wet, choking sound. Blood began trickling from her nose, then her ears, but she was smiling, even as her body convulsed. Father Matthias was backing toward the windows, his face pale with genuine terror. This isn't how it's supposed to work, he muttered. I control them. I made them. The largest doll, a 4-foot-tall figure carved from dark wood with silver inlays forming runic symbols across its chest, stepped directly into his path. When it spoke, its voice was the collective whisper of every person who died in this place. You opened the door, Matthew, but you never controlled what came through. That's when I realized the truth. Father Matthias had started with fake supernatural events, hidden speakers, psychological manipulation, carefully crafted illusions to control his followers. But somewhere along the way, his pretend rituals had attracted something real. Something that had been waiting for someone foolish enough to provide it with anchors in our world. The dolls weren't just housing spirits. They were doorways. More parents were collapsing now, their minds unable to process the impossible reunion with their deceased loved ones. But the children, we were different. We'd grown up in this madness. We could see what the adults couldn't. Emma appeared beside me, clearer than she'd ever been before. Now you understand, she said, her voice mixing with the whispers from the dolls. We never left. We've been waiting for someone strong enough to set us free. The police were pounding on the doors now, shouting commands through bullhorns. But I knew they'd be too late. This wasn't something that could be stopped with handcuffs and warrants. Father Matthias made a break for the back exit, but the wooden doll moved faster than should have been possible, wrapping carved fingers around his throat. As his face turned purple, I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Genuine remorse. I just wanted to help them, he gasped. The bereaved families. I wanted to ease their pain. By profiting from it, the doll replied in its chorus of dead voices. By feeding on their grief. By murdering those who threatened your supply of suffering. The front doors exploded inward and police officers flooded the room with tactical lights and drawn weapons. But they froze when they saw the scene. Adults convulsing in apparent seizures, while antique dolls moved independently around them. Children sitting calmly in the center of it all like we were watching a performance. I felt Emma's cold hand slip into mine. It's time to choose, Samuel. Stay with the living and spend your life wondering what was real, or come with us and finally know the truth. Around me, the other surviving children were making their choices. 3 of them stood and walked calmly toward the dolls, their faces serene. The porcelain figures embraced them gently, and the children simply faded. Not violently, not with screams or struggle. They just became less solid, less present, until they were part of the whispered chorus. My mother was still alive, barely. She reached toward me with a shaking hand, her eyes lucid for the first time in years. "Samuel," she whispered, using my real name instead of the commune designation. "Don't let them take you too. Don't let my grief destroy us both." Emma's grip tightened. She'll never be whole again. The medication, the trauma, the guilt, she's broken beyond repair. But if you come with us, you can see your father again, really see him. Through the chaos, I heard my father's voice. Not from the dolls, not from some supernatural source, but from memory. Something he'd told me the week before he died. The bravest thing you can do, kiddo, is choose to keep living even when living hurts. I pulled my hand free from Emma's grasp. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was Father Matthias's body crumpling to the floor, the wooden doll releasing its grip as police officers swarmed the room, and Emma fading back into shadow, giving me a smile that was equal parts disappointed and proud. 23 years later, I still can't sleep without leaving a light on. I'm sitting in my Chicago apartment, typing this account on a laptop that's probably worth more than everything my family owned before we joined the commune. I have a good job, a decent life, and a therapist who specializes in cult survivors. Dr. Martinez says I've made remarkable progress, considering. Considering. That's the word that haunts me. Considering what I experienced. Considering what I survived. Considering that half the people who were there that night either died during the raid or killed themselves within 5 years of escaping. The official reports were sanitized, of course. Father Matthias died of a heart attack brought on by extreme stress. 7 adults suffered simultaneous psychotic breaks due to prolonged exposure to hallucinogenic compounds found in the commune's herbal tea. 3 children disappeared during the confusion and were never found. Presumed kidnapped by unknown accomplices who escaped into the forest. No mention of moving dolls. No mention of supernatural phenomena. No mention of the temperature dropping 40 degrees in a sealed room, or the way every electronic device in the building malfunctioned simultaneously. My mother survived, technically. She's been in a state psychiatric facility in Montana for over 2 decades now. Diagnosed with treatment-resistant schizophrenia, complicated by severe PTSD. I visit her every few months. Some days she recognizes me. Most days she spends hours talking to people who aren't there, her hands moving as if she's petting invisible animals. The strangest part is that she seems peaceful, happy even. Whatever reality she's living in now, it's kinder than the one the rest of us inhabit. I've kept track of the other survivors over the years. It's easier than you'd think in the age of social media and Google alerts. Marcus, if that was even his real name, died in a house fire in Oregon 3 years after the raid. The fire started in his bedroom at 3:17 a.m., and neighbors reported seeing him standing at his window, not trying to escape but talking animatedly to someone invisible. Sarah, one of the girls who'd arrived just weeks before the final ceremony, lasted longer. She became a successful attorney, married, had kids. Then one morning her husband found her in their basement, surrounded by antique dolls she'd been secretly collecting. She'd arranged them in a perfect circle and was sitting in the center, exactly like we'd been positioned that last night. The autopsy found no cause of death. Her heart just stopped. There were others. Car accidents that happened on perfectly clear days. Suicides with no warning signs or history of depression. Disappearances that the police classified as voluntary missing persons cases, despite abandoned jobs and untouched bank accounts. I tell myself it's coincidence. Trauma manifests in different ways. and people who survive extreme experiences often struggle to readjust to normal life. The human brain isn't designed to process what we went through. But then there are the dreams. Every few months, I dream about Emma. She looks exactly as she did that night, 12 years old, wearing a white nightgown, her blonde hair perfectly braided. She never speaks in these dreams. She just stands at the foot of my bed and holds out her hand, waiting. In the dream, I can see through her to the wall behind, but I can also see the sadness in her translucent eyes, the loneliness that radiates from her like cold from an open freezer. When I wake up, there's always something different about my apartment. A book moved from one shelf to another. A photograph turned face down. Once, I found every drawer in my kitchen pulled open exactly 3 inches. Dr. Martinez says these are manifestations of hypervigilance combined with dissociative episodes. My brain is creating mysteries to explain the anxiety that has no clear source. It's textbook PTSD, she assures me. She is probably right. She has degrees from prestigious universities and decades of experience treating trauma survivors. I have memories that might be hallucinations, and a childhood spent in hell. But last week, something happened that I can't explain away so easily. I was cleaning out my closet, sorting through old boxes I've been avoiding for years. Most of it was junk, college textbooks, expired documents, clothes that no longer fit. But at the bottom of the last box, wrapped in tissue paper, I found something that made my blood freeze. A doll. Not just any doll. The Victorian porcelain figure with real human hair that had turned to look at me during that final ceremony. The one with glass eyes that seemed to track movement. The one that had been evidenced in a federal investigation and should have been destroyed decades ago. I know I didn't put it there. I know because I've never owned a single doll since escaping the commune. The sight of them sends me into panic attacks that can last for hours. But here it was, sitting in my closet like it had always belonged there. The tissue paper around it was yellowed with age, and when I unfolded it completely, I found a note written in childish handwriting. For Samuel, from your friend Emma. See you soon. I should have thrown it away immediately. Should have taken it to Dr. Martinez or donated it to a museum or burned it in my building's incinerator. Instead, I found myself placing it on my bedroom dresser, angled so it could see the entire room. That was 3 days ago. Since then, my apartment has been perfectly still. No moved objects, no open drawers, no sense of invisible presence. For the first time in over 20 years, I've been sleeping peacefully. But tonight, as I finish typing this account, I notice something that makes my hands shake so hard I can barely hit the keys. The doll is facing a different direction than when I placed it there. And in the reflection of its glass eyes, I can see a young girl in a white nightgown, sitting patiently on my bed, waiting. Emma smiles at me through the mirror of the doll's gaze, and for the first time since that terrible night, she speaks aloud. Did you miss me, Samuel? Because I never left. I'm going to publish this account and email it to everyone I can think of. Dr. Martinez, the FBI agents who worked on the case, the few journalists who covered the story. If something happens to me, at least there will be a record. The doll's head is turning now, slowly rotating to face me directly. Emma's reflection grows clearer, more solid. It's time to choose again, she whispers, her voice coming not from the doll but from everywhere at once. Stay with the living and spend every day looking over your shoulder, or come with us and finally find peace. My laptop screen is flickering. The lights in my apartment are dimming, and through my bedroom window, I can see other figures in white nightgowns standing on the fire escape, their faces pressed against the glass. All the children who never made it out. All the children who chose to go with the dolls that night. They're all here now, waiting for my answer. The strangest part is that I'm not afraid anymore. For the first time in 23 years, I feel calm. Maybe Emma's right. Maybe it's time to stop running from what happened in that commune. Maybe it's time to stop pretending that some doors once open can never truly be closed. The doll's mouth is moving now, though no sound comes out. But I can read her lips perfectly. Come home, Samuel. Come home. And you know what? I think I'm ready to listen.
The ghost of the Grand Canal. The cursor on my laptop screen blinked, mocking me. I'd lost control, and it all began with a simple tale about Emperor Yang of Sui. His life was a roller coaster of excess and tragedy, and as I dug into his story, weird stuff started happening around me. At first I brushed it off. You know how it goes. A whisper here, a chilly spot there, that creepy feeling of being watched. But let me tell you, it didn't stop there. I found myself staying up late, poring over ancient texts and scrolling through countless web pages. The more I learned about Emperor Yang, the more I felt like I was being pulled into his world. It was like his ghost was reaching out through time, tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, listen up. There's more to this story than you know." And boy, was there ever. The deeper I went, the stranger things got. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, swearing I'd heard the clash of swords or the rustle of silk robes. My apartment started feeling less like home and more like a time capsule from ancient China. But here's the kicker. I couldn't stop. Even as the line between past and present blurred, I kept writing, driven by a force I couldn't explain. Emperor Yang's story had me in its grip, and I was along for the ride, whether I liked it or not. But then it got worse. The beginning, a writer's curiosity. I had always been fascinated by history, especially stories of rulers whose ambitions led to their downfall. When I decided to write about Emperor Yang of Sui, I thought it would be straightforward research. He was known for building the Grand Canal, a monumental feat of engineering that connected northern and southern China. Yet, what intrigued me most was his reputation for excess and corruption. According to legend, Emperor Yang spent years commissioning elaborate palaces and pleasure barges, draining the empire's resources and alienating his subjects. His downfall came when rebel forces stormed the capital. It is said he was strangled by his own ministers while hiding in a women's quarters. Some accounts even claim his ghost haunted the ruins of his once glorious empire. To bring authenticity to my story, I visited a local library to dig up old manuscripts and texts. That's where I found it, an ancient map tucked away in a dusty corner. The librarian warned me not to take it, her voice trembling slightly. "Some places are better left undisturbed," she said cryptically. But curiosity got the better of me. As soon as I unfolded the map, symbols etched onto its surface began glowing faintly under the dim light. Suddenly, the room grew cold. Frost crept along the edges of the table, and a sharp scent of damp earth filled the air. Before I could react, words appeared on the map, written in ink that seemed to bleed from nowhere. "Seeker, beware. The path to power demands sacrifice." Panic surged through me as I rolled the map back up and shoved it into my bag. I told myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. After all, how could a piece of paper cause such a reaction? But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The middle, whispers from the past. That night, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of opulent palaces, shadowy figures bowing before a throne, and a man dressed in silk robes staring directly at me. His face was stern yet sorrowful, his eyes burning with desperation. I recognized him immediately. It was Emperor Yang himself. "You have awakened what should remain dormant," he whispered, his voice echoing unnaturally in the silence of my bedroom. "Now you must pay the price." Before I could scream, the vision dissolved, leaving me gasping for breath. My heart pounded wildly as I sat upright in bed, clutching the blanket tightly. The clock on my nightstand read 3 o'clock in the morning, the witching hour, according to Folklore. Desperate for answers, I returned to the library the next day, hoping to uncover more information about the map. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. According to legend, Emperor Yang had commissioned a secret chamber beneath the Grand Canal, where he stored treasures meant to ensure his immortality. However, the process required human sacrifices, binding the souls of the victims to his will. Those who dared disturb the chamber risked becoming part of the curse themselves. Summoning courage, I examined the map again, this time noticing tiny characters hidden within the margins. They formed a warning: break the bond or join the cursed. Determined to end whatever connection I had unwittingly forged, I sought help from a historian specializing in ancient Chinese artifacts. Her name was Dr. Mai Lin, and though skeptical at first, she agreed to assist after hearing my account. Over tea, she explained that breaking a curse often required confronting its origin head-on. You need to return the map to its rightful place, she advised solemnly. Only then can you sever the ties binding you to Emperor Yang's spirit. They end, breaking free. Armed with knowledge and determination, I traveled to the site of the Grand Canal, where Emperor Yang's secret chamber was rumored to be located. Under the cover of night, I climbed aboard a small boat and rowed silently toward the center of the waterway. There, guided by markings on the map, I located a submerged entrance partially hidden by reeds and moss. With great effort, I pulled open the heavy stone door and descended into the darkness below. Inside, the air was thick and stale, carrying the scent of decay. Faint whispers echoed through the narrow passageways, growing louder as I approached the central chamber. In the middle of the room stood a pedestal holding a golden box, adorned with intricate carvings. As I placed the map atop the box, the ground trembled slightly, and a warm breeze swept through the chamber. The map glowed brightly for a moment before bursting into flames. When I returned home, the disturbances ceased entirely. Footsteps no longer echoed through empty rooms, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Though I've since resumed writing, the memory of that night continues to haunt me. Sometimes, when I sit alone at my desk, I swear I can still hear faint whispers carried by the wind. And whenever I pass by a mirror, I half expect to see a spectral figure standing just over my shoulder. Because deep down I know one wrong decision, one careless moment, and everything can change in an instant. The hole in the floor. I've heard many stories here, and I've always wondered what if I should share my story too. Generally, I'm a very skeptical person about anything paranormal, religious beliefs, concepts like auras or energies or anything like that. But this story is mostly about my mother, who decided to share it with me one day when I was a bit older. First, I'll start with a small anecdote of mine that I believe could be connected to this story. When I was between 5 and 8 years old, I lived with my mother in my great-grandmother's old house at the time. I had many stuffed animals, toys, and makeup kits for kids. Every time I came home from school, I would find my toys scattered pretty much everywhere, and many of them would even go missing. The most striking thing, though, happened to me when my mom asked me to go and tell my uncle, who lived further back on the property, that we were leaving with him in the morning in his car. At the time, I was unpacking one of my disorganized makeup kits. After informing my uncle, I returned to find the kit completely organized. I went to my mom and asked her if she had done it. She looked confused at first, and I noticed a certain sort of seriousness in her face. Then suddenly she smiled and said, "Yes, sweetie, it was me. I just wanted to play a little prank on you." After that, I didn't give it too much thought. At the time, I used to sleep with her in a big bed. One night while we were sleeping, my mom got up and saw my great-grandmother putting a dish in the kitchen. My mom asked her if she had organized the makeup kit that I had spoken to her about. My great-grandmother, confused, said that she hadn't and had been resting the entire time. But something that caught my attention was when she said, "They'd probably come back." "They're back," my mom returned, and I pretended to be asleep. The next day, she took me to my grandmother's house to stay for a week. When I came back, everything was normal, and eventually I forgot about it. Since then, many strange things have happened to me, but I didn't pay much attention to them. I guess you could say now here's my mother's story. Not long ago, she asked me if I remembered what happened with the makeup kit, and I said yes, of course. She then told me that when she was 6 years old, she lived in that same house with her grandmother, my great-grandmother, and slept in the same room where we used to sleep. Her grandmother had her own room, and she said that she used to hear small footsteps inside of her room every night. Things would be moved around, clothes would disappear, and objects would even go missing. One night, she felt something climb onto her bed, like a cat had jumped onto it. She got scared and hid under the covers when suddenly something spoke to her from the darkness. It introduced itself with a very tiny voice and asked her not to turn on the light. From that night on, everything changed. They visited her every night, talking to her. She would ask them who they were and what they wanted, and these things simply said that they were her friends and had come to visit her because they liked her. As the nights went on, she started to have doubts and became afraid. These voices would tell her to go with them, that they would take her to beautiful places full of colors and toys. Over time, they got closer and even began to touch her. She described the hands as very tiny, like a newborn baby's hands. One night, one of them even pulled her hair playfully, and that's when she started to get really worried. They kept insisting that she crawl under the bed for some reason. The fear grew so much that she asked her grandmother if she could sleep in her room, telling her that the goblins wanted to take her away. My great-grandmother, who was very religious but didn't believe in fantasy, agreed to sleep with her in her room. Eventually, while they slept, these things returned and woke my mother up. She could feel them pulling on her clothes, trying to sort of drag her under the bed a bit. She finally managed to wake her grandmother, and before too long, her grandmother suddenly stood up, turned on the light, and they both heard things scurrying around the room, crying. My mother explained everything that she had heard all those nights. Her grandmother told her not to worry, and admitted that she had heard them too. She carried my mother to her own room and locked my mother's bedroom with a padlock. The next morning, very early, they called people from the church to come and inspect the house. They didn't doubt my great-grandmother either, as she was considered to be a wise and truthful woman. When they moved the bed, there was a hole in the floor about the size of my mother, and very deep, as she described it. They sealed it with cement that day, and placed wooden planks over it too. When my mom told me this story, I asked my great-grandmother about it while she was still alive, and she confirmed my mother's story and shared what she had heard as well. From then on, every time I visited that house, it always gave me an eerie feeling. My mom said that she was afraid these things might have come back for me. Since they sealed the hole, they never bothered her again, but I still can't explain what happened with my makeup set and all of the stuffed animals that I've lost. Whatever the case may be, it's a very skin-crawling story, isn't it? The house that waits for me. In the quiet, almost forgotten town of Elmwood, where time moves sluggishly and the air is thick with the scent of pine, there stands an old, enigmatic house at the edge of the town. This house is no ordinary dwelling. It is a keeper of secrets, a silent witness to the lives of those who have come and gone. Its weathered boards and peeling paint hide stories of generations past, and though it appears neglected, the lawn is always meticulously maintained, as if tended by unseen hands. The townsfolk whisper about it in hushed tones, a place where time seems to pause. It is a house that exudes an aura of mystery and unease, its empty windows like hollow eyes that watch and wait. The story follows the journey of an unnamed protagonist, a young adult who has grown up in Elmwood, where the old house has always been a source of eerie fascination. As a child, they would hurriedly pass by the house on their way home from school, feeling the weight of unseen gazes. The house was a place of dark allure, a ghostly presence that loomed over their mundane life. But as they grew older, the house's enigmatic pull only intensified. One fateful autumn night, as the protagonist walks home from a late shift at the local diner, they notice something peculiar, a faint, flickering light in the upstairs window of the house. This discovery sets off a chain of events that draws them deeper into the house's mysterious world. The encounter with a shadowy figure who waves back at them from the window awakens a curiosity that cannot be ignored. But as they delve deeper into the house's secrets, they realize that the house is not just a silent observer. It is alive, and it has begun to exert a sinister influence over their life. The protagonist starts experiencing nightmares, visions of the house's creaking door, and the darkness within. They begin to feel an overwhelming sense of being watched, and the boundaries between reality and illusion start to blur. The house seems to be calling to them, pulling them into a realm where time stands still. As the nightmares intensify and the house's presence becomes more palpable, the protagonist realizes they are trapped in a dance of dread. The house has become a living entity, its darkness a trap from which they cannot escape. The story explores themes of curiosity, fear, and the idea that some mysteries are better left unexplored. It delves into the psychological impact of the house's haunting presence, as the protagonist becomes increasingly isolated, unable to distinguish between what is real and what is imagined. The house, once a source of fascination, has become a prison, its secrets and darkness consuming their life. As the protagonist struggles to find the courage to confront the house and its enigmatic occupant, they must face the possibility that some secrets are meant to remain buried. Will they find the strength to uncover the truth behind the house's sentinel of secrets, or will they succumb to its relentless pull? And what lies at the heart of the house? Truth, terror, or something far more sinister? The Sentinel of Secrets is a haunting tale of mystery, psychological horror, and the unsettling idea that the most enigmatic places can hold the darkest truths. It is a story that reminds us that sometimes the things we cannot see are the most real and the most terrifying. In the heart of a small, sleepy town, where the streets were lined with towering ancient oaks and the air was heavy with the scent of pine, there stood an old house that had seen generations come and go. The house was no ordinary abode. It loomed on the edge of town, its crooked boards and peeling paint whispering tales of yesteryears. The windows were like empty eyes, staring out onto the world with a quiet intensity. Yet, despite its neglected appearance, the lawn was always immaculate, as if tended by unseen hands. The townsfolk spoke of it in hushed tones, a place where time seemed to stand still. As a child, I often passed this house on my way home from school. The crunch of gravel beneath my feet and the distant hum of a lawnmower at dusk were familiar sounds, but the house loomed silently, its windows like empty eyes staring back. I could feel unseen gazes upon me, and a chill would run down my spine each time I hurried past. My friends and I would dare each other to knock on the door, but none ever did. To us, the house was a place of eerie fascination, a ghostly presence in our otherwise mundane lives. The house seemed to breathe, its wooden siding creaking softly with every gust of wind. At night, when the moon hung low, I swore I could hear a faint whisper carried on the breeze, a low, mournful sound that sent shivers down my spine. My parents dismissed it as the wind, but I knew better. The house was alive, and it was watching. Years passed, and I grew into a young adult, working late shifts at the local diner. My walks home often took me past the old house, now shrouded in the mystery of night. The street lamp cast long shadows, and the creak of the old wooden sign in the wind sent shivers down my spine. The house seemed to grow taller in the darkness, its silhouette casting an ominous shape against the stars. One crisp autumn night, as the leaves rustled and the moon hung low, I noticed something different, a faint light flickering in the upstairs window. My heart skipped a beat. The house, once a silent observer, now seemed alive. I paused, my breath visible in the chill air, and waved hesitantly. To my astonishment, a shadowy figure waved back. The gesture was small, almost friendly, but it sent a chill coursing through my veins. I hurried home, the encounter replaying in my mind like a haunting melody. That night, sleep eluded me. The image of the figure lingered, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself avoiding that street, but the house presence lingered in my thoughts. Then, the nightmares began. In my dreams, I stood before the house, the door creaking open with a dreadful screech. I stepped inside, my feet moving against my will, into a darkness that wrapped around me like a shroud. One morning, I awoke to find my front door wide open, the cool breeze a stark reminder of the house's reach. It was then I realized I couldn't escape its pull. The figure began to appear in fleeting glimpses in my mirror, by my bed, always watching. Her presence was a heartbeat in the darkness, a slow, steady pulse that echoed through my home. The air grew colder, and the scent of pine turned to something earthy and decaying. I could feel her near me, a shadowy figure at the edge of my vision. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but deep down I knew the truth. The house had found me, and it wouldn't let me go. Then one fateful night, she knocked. The sound was gentle, a soft tap, tap, tap that resonated through my apartment. My breath caught, my heart pounding as the lock clicked, and the door creaked open. The hallway was a void, yet I felt her there, a shadowy figure at the edge of my vision. I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The figure stepped closer, her presence filling the room with an icy chill. I could see her now, tall, gaunt, her face shrouded in shadows. She reached out a bony hand and whispered a single word, "Come." I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The world around me began to blur, and I felt myself being pulled toward the door. The last thing I heard was the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears before everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor of the old house. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of decay filled my nostrils. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot. The room was dimly lit, the flickering light casting eerie shadows on the walls. The figure stood over me, her face still hidden in the shadows. She reached out and placed a cold hand on my shoulder. I could feel her breath on my neck, a slow, steady pulse that echoed through the room. Then she spoke. Her voice was low and gravelly, a sound that seemed to come from the very walls of the house. "Welcome home," she said. "I've been waiting for you." As she spoke, the shadows around her began to fade, revealing a face that was both familiar and strange. It was a face I had seen before, in old photographs and flickering memories. It was the face of a young girl, no older than me, with piercing eyes and a haunting smile. "My name is Emily," she said, her voice softening. "And this house, it's been waiting for you." As I listened, Emily told me the story of the house. It was a story of love, loss, and betrayal. A story that spanned generations. The house had been built by her father, a man consumed by grief after her mother's death. He had poured his heart and soul into its walls, hoping to keep her memory alive. But when Emily died under mysterious circumstances, her spirit became trapped within the house. For decades, the house had stood as a testament to their love and loss. But as the years passed, the town forgot, and the house was left to rot. Yet, Emily remained, trapped in a world between the living and the dead. When I appeared, she saw something in me that she hadn't seen in years: hope. I was the key to her freedom, the one who could help her finally rest in peace. But there was a twist. The house had a mind of its own, and it wouldn't let Emily go without a fight. As I listened to her story, the walls began to shift and groan. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The house was angry, and it would do anything to keep Emily trapped. I could feel its presence around me, a dark, suffocating force that pressed against my chest. I knew then that I had to act fast. With trembling hands, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small object. It was an old key, one I had found days earlier in the dirt outside the house. Without thinking, I inserted it into a rusty lock hidden behind a cobweb-covered portrait. The lock clicked open with a satisfying clunk, and the walls seemed to shudder in response. The key was the key to Emily's freedom. With a final burst of strength, I turned it, and the house let out a deafening roar. The walls shook, the windows shattered, and the floor beneath me trembled. But in the chaos, I heard Emily's voice, clear and strong. "Thank you," she said. "You've set me free." And with that, the house fell silent. The darkness receded, and the air grew warm once more. The shadowy figure was gone, and in her place stood a young girl, her face bathed in light. "Goodbye," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And thank you." As I watched, she faded away, her form dissolving into the light. The house, once a prison, was finally at peace. I stumbled out of the house, my heart still pounding in my chest. The night air was cool and refreshing, and the stars shone brightly overhead. The house loomed behind me, its windows no longer empty, but filled with a warm, golden light. I turned to look at it one last time. For the first time in years, the house seemed alive, its presence no longer a source of fear, but of comfort. The crooked boards and peeling paint seemed to smile, and the windows, once empty eyes, now shone like warm, inviting pools. The house had finally found peace, and so had Emily. Epilogue: The house's legacy. Now, as I walk through the town, I see the house in a new light. It's no longer a place of fear, but a reminder of the power of love and forgiveness. The townsfolk still speak of it in hushed tones, but now they speak of it with reverence. The house on Willow Creek is no longer a sentinel of secrets, but a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. And as for Emily, she's finally home. But as I pass by the house one crisp autumn night, I hear a faint whisper on the breeze, a low, mournful sound that sends a shiver down my spine. I pause and look up at the house. The windows are dark once more, and the air is heavy with the scent of pine. The house may be at peace, but I can't help but wonder, what other secrets does it hold? So, the next time you pass an old, empty house, remember, the things that go bump in the night are sometimes all too real, and the most inviting sights can hide the greatest terrors, but they can also hold the greatest truths. Sleep well.
I never believed in family curses until I inherited Aunt Martha's house in rural Michigan. My mother always said Martha was the black sheep of our family, the one who dabbled in things she shouldn't have. When I was growing up in Detroit, Mom would whisper warnings about Martha's strange ways and how she lived alone in that old farmhouse, collecting peculiar artifacts from her travels around the world. But Martha was dead now, and somehow she'd left everything to me. Her nephew she'd met exactly twice in 26 years. The house sat on 40 acres of dense woodland, isolated from the nearest neighbor by miles of twisted oak trees and overgrown paths. When I first pulled up the gravel driveway, the afternoon sun was already casting long shadows across the wraparound porch. The place looked like something from a Gothic novel, all dark wood and pointed gables, with windows that seemed to watch my every move. Inside, the house felt heavier than it should have. Every room was filled with Martha's collections, masks from Africa, statues from South America, crystals from God knows where, and books written in languages I couldn't identify. But it was the doll room that made my skin crawl. Martha had converted the entire second bedroom into a display space for dolls. Hundreds of them lined the walls on custom shelves. Porcelain faces with glass eyes, cloth bodies and faded dresses, some so old their paint had begun to chip away like diseased skin. They were arranged by size and origin, creating an eerie museum of childhood innocence turned sinister by time and neglect. In the center of the room sat a Victorian dollhouse, complete with miniature furniture and tiny inhabitants. But what caught my attention wasn't the dollhouse itself. It was the single doll sitting beside it. Unlike the others, this one looked almost new. Her blonde hair was perfectly curled, her blue dress crisp and clean, and her green eyes seemed to follow me as I moved around the room. A small brass plate at the base read, Lily, Prague, 1952. I should have left that doll alone. Should have packed up Martha's things and sold the house immediately. But something about Lily drew me in. Maybe it was the craftsmanship, or maybe it was the way the afternoon light made her porcelain skin look almost alive. I brought her downstairs to the living room, setting her on the mantelpiece where I could see her while I worked through Martha's papers. That's when I found the journal. Martha's handwriting was sharp and angular, like spider legs across the yellowed pages. Most entries were mundane. Grocery lists, weather observations, notes about her garden. But as I read deeper, the tone began to shift. March 15th, 1989. Acquired new piece from estate sale in Prague. The seller warned me about its history, but I dismissed his superstitions. The doll is exquisite. March 22nd, 1989. Strange dreams since bringing Lily home. Keep seeing a little girl in my sleep crying for her mother. The dreams feel too real. April 3rd, 1989. The crying isn't just in my dreams anymore. I hear it during the day, soft and distant, like an echo from another room. Always when I'm alone with the doll. April 18th, 1989. Discovered the truth about Lily today. The seller's grandson finally returned my calls. The doll belonged to a family killed during the war. The little girl, also named Lily, died clutching the doll in the basement where they were hiding. They say her spirit. The entry ended mid-sentence, the ink trailing off as if Martha had been interrupted. I flipped through the remaining pages, but they were blank. That night, I dreamed of a little girl with green eyes and blonde curls. She stood at the foot of my bed, pointing at the doll on the mantelpiece, her mouth moving, but no sound came out. I woke in a cold sweat, heart pounding, and looked toward the living room. The doll was gone. I found Lily in the kitchen, sitting upright in one of the chairs at the small breakfast table. Her green eyes seemed brighter in the moonlight streaming through the window, and for a moment I could have sworn I saw her chest rise and fall as if she were breathing. "This is ridiculous," I muttered, grabbing the doll and carrying her back to the mantelpiece. Dolls don't move by themselves. But even as I said it, I remembered reading about the placebo effect in my psychology classes. How our expectations could create experiences that felt completely real. Maybe the power of suggestion from Martha's journal was making me see things that weren't there. The next morning, I called my girlfriend Sarah back in Detroit. "You sound terrible," she said after I'd explained about the inheritance and the strange dreams. "I think I'm just stressed. This whole situation with Martha's house being alone out here. It's getting to me. Why don't I drive up this weekend? Help you sort through things?" I felt a wave of relief. That would be great. I could use the company. But when Sarah arrived Friday evening, things only got worse. She loved the house at first, wandering through the rooms and examining Martha's collections with genuine fascination. When she saw the doll room, she actually gasped with delight. "These are incredible. Some of these dolls must be worth thousands of dollars." She picked up a few of the older pieces, turning them over in her hands with the reverence of someone who understood their value. But when we reached the living room, she saw Lily on the mantelpiece. Her expression changed. "Where did this one come from?" she asked, her voice suddenly flat. "That's Lily. She was in the doll room, but I moved her down here. There's something about her. She's watching me." Sarah's words came out as barely a whisper. I followed her gaze to the doll. From our angle, Lily's green eyes did seem to be focused directly on Sarah, but that was just the way the light hit the glass. "It's just the positioning," I explained. "All dolls look like that." But Sarah had already backed away, wrapping her arms around herself. "I don't like her. There's something wrong with her eyes." That night, Sarah insisted we move Lily to another room. We put her in the guest bedroom upstairs, face down on the dresser so her eyes wouldn't be visible. Sarah seemed to relax after that, and we spent the evening going through more of Martha's papers, trying to piece together an inventory for the estate. I woke around 3 in the morning to the sound of Sarah talking in her sleep. She was lying next to me, still unconscious, but her voice was clear and childlike. Nothing like her normal speaking voice. "Mama? Mama, where are you? I'm scared, Mama. The bad men are coming." I shook her gently. "Sarah, wake up." Her eyes snapped open, but for a moment, they looked different. Younger, duller, more frightened. Then she blinked, and she was herself again. "What happened?" she asked, sitting up. "You were talking in your sleep, having a nightmare." She rubbed her temples. "I dreamed I was hiding in a dark basement. There were footsteps upstairs, heavy boots, and I was holding something important, but I couldn't see what it was. My blood went cold." "What else do you remember?" "There was a little girl with me. She looked just like..." Sarah's voice trailed off as her gaze drifted toward the guest bedroom. "Just like that doll." We found Lily sitting upright on the dresser, no longer face down where we'd left her. Her green eyes seemed to gleam in the darkness, and her porcelain lips had curved into what looked almost like a smile. "We're leaving," Sarah said, already grabbing her clothes. "Right now." But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I needed to understand what was happening, needed to know the truth about Lily and Martha and the strange legacy I'd inherited. Sarah left without me, and I didn't blame her. As her taillights disappeared down the dark driveway, I felt the house settle around me like a living thing, its wooden bones creaking in the wind. I spent the rest of the night in Martha's study, searching through her books and papers for any mention of the doll or its history. What I found chilled me to the bone. Hidden in a locked drawer I'd missed before, I discovered a folder labeled Lily, Prague Gay. Inside were newspaper clippings, all in Czech, but the photographs told the story clearly enough. A family of 4, parents and 2 young daughters, killed during a raid in 1952. The youngest girl, Lily Novak, was found clutching a porcelain doll that matched her perfectly, right down to the blonde curls and blue dress. But there was more. Martha had included translations of the articles and notes in her own handwriting about spiritual attachment and unfinished business. According to her research, the doll had passed through several owners since the war, and each had reported similar experiences. Dreams of the little girl, strange voices, objects moving on their own. The last owner, an elderly man in Prague, had finally sold the doll to Martha after what he described as months of torment. He told Martha that the spirit of the little girl was trapped, reliving her final moments over and over, searching for her mother who died in the same basement. Martha's final entry in the folder was dated just 3 months before her death. I understand now what Lily needs. She's not evil. She's lost, traumatized. The violent nature of her death has trapped her spirit in a state of perpetual fear and confusion. She attaches to women because she's looking for the maternal comfort she lost. But the attachment becomes possessive, dangerous. She doesn't mean to hurt anyone, but her need is so desperate, so consuming, that she pulls living people into her own nightmare. I've tried everything: sage, salt, holy water, even brought in a priest. Nothing works because she doesn't want to leave. This doll is the only connection she has to the physical world, the only thing that makes her feel safe. But her presence is affecting my health, my sanity. I can feel her in my mind sometimes, a frightened child clawing at my thoughts. There's only one solution I can think of, but it will require someone with the right sensitivity, someone she might trust enough to let go. I'm too old, too set in my ways. But maybe my nephew, he has the gift even if he doesn't know it yet. Our family has always been sensitive to the other side, though most of us learn to ignore it. If something happens to me, I hope he'll understand. I hope he'll help her find peace. As I read those final words, I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly, already knowing what I'd see. Lily sat in the doorway, no longer on her shelf upstairs. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, translucent but visible in the dim light, was the ghost of a little girl. She looked exactly like the doll. Blonde curls, blue dress, green eyes wide with fear and hope. She didn't speak, but I could hear her voice in my mind, clear as a bell. "Help me find Mama." I understood then what Martha had known, what she'd tried to prepare me for. This wasn't about evil spirits or ancient curses. This was about trauma, about a child's soul so damaged by violence and loss that death itself couldn't release her. The doll wasn't possessed. It was a lifeline, an anchor that kept Lily's spirit tethered to a world where she no longer belonged. But she couldn't move on alone. She needed someone to help her, to guide her to whatever came next. I knelt down so I was at eye level with the ghost child. "Your mama isn't here anymore, Lily. She's waiting for you somewhere safe, somewhere peaceful, but you have to let go of the doll to find her." The little girl shook her head, tears streaming down her translucent cheeks. "I'm scared." "I know you are, but holding on to fear is what keeps you trapped. Your mama wouldn't want you to stay here, frightened and alone." I reached out my hand, not to the doll, but to the ghost. "I'll help you. I'll stay with you until you're not scared anymore." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the little girl reached out and took my hand. Her touch was cold but real, and I felt the weight of her terror, her loneliness, her desperate love for a mother she'd lost 70 years ago. But I also felt something else. Martha's presence, warm and protective, wrapping around both of us like a blanket. She was still here, had been here all along, waiting to help her nephew understand. His inheritance wasn't just a house full of curiosities. It was a gift. The sensitivity she'd written about, the ability to see beyond the veil between worlds. Together, the three of us, the living, the dead, and the somewhere in between, sat in that dusty study as dawn broke over the Michigan woods. I held the ghost child's hand while Martha's spirit whispered words of comfort, and slowly, gradually, Lily's fear began to fade. When the sun finally crested the tree line, casting golden light through the windows, the little girl looked up at me with eyes that were no longer afraid. "I can see her," she whispered. "Mama's there in the light." The porcelain doll on the floor cracked down the middle with a sound like a sigh, and Lily Novak finally went home. I buried the broken doll in Martha's garden that afternoon, marking the spot with a small wooden cross. The house felt different now, lighter, cleaner, as if a weight had been lifted from its very foundations. But as I walked back to the house, I noticed something that made me pause. In the doll room upstairs, one of the shelves had fallen during the night. Most of the dolls had tumbled to the floor, but a few remained standing, and each one of them was looking directly at me. I realized then that Martha's journal had mentioned Lily specifically, but what about the others? What about the masks from Africa, the statues from South America, the artifacts from dozens of countries around the world? What if Martha hadn't just been a collector? What if she'd been a rescuer? As night fell over the farmhouse, I heard them, soft whispers in languages I didn't recognize, gentle sobbing from empty rooms, the sound of footsteps on stairs where no one walked. I wasn't alone in Martha's house. I'd never been alone. And now, with Lily at peace and Martha's true purpose finally clear, I understood what I'd really inherited. Not just a house or a collection, but a responsibility. A calling that ran in our family's blood, passed down from aunt to nephew like a sacred trust. The spirits weren't gone. They were waiting for someone sensitive enough to hear their stories, patient enough to understand their pain, and strong enough to help them find their way home. I picked up Martha's journal and turned to a fresh page. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying voices from across time and distance. Lost souls who'd somehow found their way to this place, to this house, to this family that had always stood at the crossroads between worlds. Day 1, I wrote. I'm beginning to understand. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, and somewhere in the darkness, a child began to cry. Not Lily. She was safe now, reunited with her mother in whatever realm awaited the dead. This was someone else. Someone new. Someone who needed help finding their way home. I closed the journal and stood up, feeling the weight of generations settling on my shoulders. Martha had prepared me for this, even if I hadn't known it at the time. The sensitivity, the gift, the ability to see and hear what others couldn't, it was all part of the inheritance. As I climbed the stairs toward the crying, I wondered how many more there were. How many lost souls had found their way to Martha's door over the years, drawn by her reputation as someone who could help them find peace. How many were still waiting for their turn? The crying grew louder as I reached the second floor, leading me toward a room I hadn't fully explored yet. Martha's bedroom, where she'd spent her final years surrounded by the echoes of lives cut short, deaths that left too much unfinished business behind. I pushed open the door and stepped inside, ready to meet whoever was waiting for me in the darkness, ready to begin the work that was now mine to do. The inheritance from Aunt Martha wasn't just a house full of curiosities after all. It was a sanctuary for the lost, and I was its new keeper.
The island beckons. The journey to the island began with a long, winding path that seemed to stretch endlessly before me. My legs burned with every step, and by the time I reached the shore, they were utterly worn out. Seeking refuge from the relentless sun, I found a shady spot beneath an ancient banyan tree, its sprawling roots twisting like veins across the earth. As I rested, the island revealed itself. A lush expanse of greenery encircling a central peak that pierced the sky. It was isolated, untouched by modern hands, promising solitude but whispering secrets in the rustle of leaves. This place had been my sanctuary since childhood, a retreat where time felt irrelevant, almost non-existent. Yet, as I gazed out at the horizon, a peculiar sensation crept over me, an unsettling awareness that this visit might be different. The air was thick with anticipation, charged with an energy that seemed to pulse through the very ground beneath my feet. Shadows danced eerily among the trees, not cast by any visible source, and the usual symphony of wildlife was conspicuously silent. I recalled tales from old fishermen who spoke of the island's strange allure, how it drew people in only to leave them forever changed or lost. These stories, once dismissed as mere folklore, now echoed ominously in my mind. The whispers grew louder, urging me forward, deeper into the heart of the island. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the island itself was testing my resolve. The dense foliage swallowed the sunlight, casting long, ominous shadows that played tricks on my eyes. Every sound, every movement seemed amplified, each rustle of leaves a potential harbinger of unseen dangers, lurking just beyond sight. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply, and a chilling breeze swept through the forest, carrying with it the faint scent of salt and decay. The stars above twinkled indifferently, their light failing to penetrate the canopy overhead. In this eerie stillness, I realized that the island held secrets far darker than I had imagined. This wasn't just a place forgotten by time. It was a place that bent time to its will, ensnaring those who dared to explore its depths in a web of mystery and dread. With each passing moment, the line between reality and illusion blurred, pulling me inexorably into the island's enigmatic embrace. The first night on the island was anything but restful. As darkness enveloped the land, a cacophony of unfamiliar sounds filled the air. Soft whispers that seemed to emanate from the very trees themselves, rustling leaves that moved without wind, and distant, rhythmic tapping that echoed through the dense forest like a heartbeat. Each noise wove a tapestry of unease, tightening the knot of anxiety in my chest. I tried to rationalize these disturbances as natural phenomena, yet the persistent, unnatural quality of the sounds defied all logic. Venturing further into the island's interior, I discovered a series of stone structures half buried in the undergrowth, their surfaces covered in moss and vines. They appeared ancient, perhaps remnants of a civilization long forgotten by history. Intrigued and slightly apprehensive, I approached one of the larger stones, running my fingers over the intricate carvings etched into its surface. The symbols were unlike any I had seen before, swirling patterns that seemed to shift under my touch, whispering secrets in a language lost to time. As I stood there, entranced by the mysterious carvings, a sudden chill ran down my spine. The air around me grew colder, and the whispers intensified, forming words that I could almost understand. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision, too quick to discern clearly. My heart pounded as I turned, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, revealing nothing but the dense wall of vegetation. Yet, the feeling of being watched was palpable, pressing against me like a physical force. The intensity of the island's mysteries deepened with each passing hour. I stumbled upon a clearing where the moonlight bathed the ground in a silvery glow, highlighting a circle of standing stones arranged in a perfect ring. At the center lay an altar-like structure, its surface marred by deep grooves and stains that hinted at rituals conducted under the cover of countless nights. The air here was thick, heavy with the scent of earth and something else, something metallic and sharp. Unable to resist the pull of curiosity despite the growing dread, I stepped closer to the altar. As I did, the ground beneath my feet trembled slightly, and a low hum resonated from the stones, vibrating through my body. The whispers transformed into a chorus of voices, overlapping and urgent, speaking in tongues both foreign and hauntingly familiar. It was as if the island itself was alive, communicating through these ancient relics, warning or beckoning, I couldn't tell which. With each new discovery, the island's grip tightened, weaving its enigmatic spell around me. The line between the known and the unknowable blurred further, drawing me deeper into its labyrinth of secrets. The initial intrigue morphed into a consuming obsession, each unanswered question spawning 10 more, each shadow hiding a dozen others. The island was no longer just a place. It was a living entity, breathing, watching, waiting. And I, willingly or not, was becoming part of its eternal narrative. By the third day, the island's sinister allure had transformed into a palpable menace. Each step I took deeper into its heart brought a crescendo of unsettling phenomena that gnawed relentlessly at my sanity. The once soothing whispers had morphed into piercing shrieks that reverberated through the dense canopy, making sleep an elusive dream. Nightmares plagued my few moments of rest, vivid and horrifying visions of shadowy figures performing ancient rites under the cold gaze of the moon. During daylight, the island seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Trees would inexplicably sway in the absence of wind, their branches clawing at the sky as if trying to escape some unseen torment. The ground beneath my feet felt unstable, quivering occasionally as though the earth itself was alive and restless. My attempts to document these occurrences were thwarted by the malfunctioning of my equipment. Cameras captured only static-filled images, and my voice recorder picked up only distorted echoes of my own voice, layered with incomprehensible murmurs. One afternoon, while exploring a particularly dense thicket, I stumbled upon a hidden glade. The air here was thick and humid, almost suffocating, and the light filtered through the leaves in eerie shifting patterns. At the center of the glade stood an enormous tree, its bark blackened and cracked, with roots that twisted unnaturally, gripping the earth like talons. Around the base of the tree, I found offerings, rotting fruits, shards of broken pottery, and feathers, all arranged in a deliberate pattern that suggested ritualistic intent. The sight chilled me to the bone, yet I was drawn to it, compelled by an unseen force. As I approached, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent, forming words in a language that stirred something primal within me. My head throbbed with the effort of resisting the urge to respond, to speak the words aloud. The pressure built until it felt like my skull would split open. I clutched at my temples, sinking to my knees as tears streamed down my face, overwhelmed by a terror so profound it bordered on madness. It was then that I noticed the changes in myself. My reflection in a nearby puddle showed eyes wide with fear, pupils dilated, skin pale and clammy. But there was something else, a faint, dark aura that seemed to hover around me, distorting the image like heat waves. Panic surged anew as I realized the island was not just affecting my mind, it was altering my very essence. Desperate for escape, I retraced my steps back towards the shore, hoping to find solace in the familiar path that had led me here. But the island had other plans. The trail twisted and turned unpredictably, leading me in circles, mocking my attempts to flee. Each loop brought me closer to despair, the oppressive atmosphere closing in around me like a vice. In this state of heightened vulnerability, I encountered the most harrowing manifestation yet. Emerging from the shadows, a figure cloaked in tattered robes advanced slowly, its face obscured by darkness. The air around it shimmered with an unnatural energy, and the whispers coalesced into a deafening roar as it raised a skeletal hand towards me. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots, my screams swallowed by the voracious silence that followed. Exhausted and terrified, I collapsed, my body trembling uncontrollably. The island had stripped away my defenses, leaving me exposed and defenseless against its relentless assault on my psyche. As consciousness faded, the last thing I saw was the figure bending over me, its hollow eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light, sealing my fate within the island's eternal grasp. As dawn broke over the island, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I found myself lying amidst the tangled roots of the ancient tree, my body stiff and aching from the night's ordeal. The figure that had haunted my final conscious moments was gone, leaving behind only a lingering chill in the air and a profound sense of foreboding. Gathering what little strength remained, I pushed myself up, my eyes scanning the glade for any sign of the spectral visitor. Nothing stirred except the gentle rustle of leaves, yet the oppressive weight of the island's secrets pressed down on me with renewed vigor. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I circled the massive tree, my fingers tracing the deep fissures in its bark. The offerings at its base seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, each item humming softly as if alive. It was then that I noticed a peculiar indentation in the earth near the tree's roots, a circular depression barely noticeable unless one was looking closely. Kneeling, I brushed away the loose soil and leaves, revealing a metal ring embedded in the ground. With a mixture of dread and determination, I gripped the ring and pulled. The ground gave way with a reluctant groan, unveiling a hidden chamber beneath the tree. A ladder made of rotting wood descended into darkness, the air wafting up damp and musty. Heart pounding, I descended cautiously, each rung creaking under my weight. The chamber below was small, its walls lined with shelves crammed full of artifacts, ancient scrolls, jars sealed with wax, and bones yellowed with age. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, atop which rested a large, leather-bound book. Opening the tome, I discovered pages filled with the same swirling symbols I had seen carved into the stones. But here, alongside the cryptic markings, were illustrations, diagrams of celestial alignments, maps of the island marked with points of power, and depictions of rituals involving the tree. The text, though indecipherable, seemed to resonate with the whispers that had tormented me, each page pulsing faintly, as if imbued with the same energy that permeated the island. Suddenly, the chamber shuddered, and a low rumble echoed through the confined space. Dust rained down from the ceiling as the ground trembled, the vibrations growing stronger with each passing second. Clutching the book to my chest, I scrambled back up the ladder, emerging into the glade just as the tree began to shift. Its roots writhed like serpents, tearing at the earth as if seeking to uproot themselves entirely. The offerings scattered, rolling away as the ground cracked and split beneath them. A blinding flash of light erupted from the tree, engulfing the glade in a radiant glow that banished the shadows and silenced the whispers. For a moment, everything was still, the world holding its breath. Then, as quickly as it had come, the light faded, leaving behind a profound silence. The oppressive atmosphere that had clung to the island like a shroud lifted, replaced by a serene calm that whispered of peace rather than menace. Clutching the ancient book, I staggered back towards the shore, the revelations within its pages burning in my mind. The island, once a prison of secrets, now seemed to release its hold, allowing me to leave with the knowledge it had guarded for centuries. As I boarded the boat that would carry me back to the mainland, I glanced back at the receding silhouette of the island, its mysteries now part of me, forever intertwined with my soul. The journey had changed me irrevocably, but with the truth unveiled, I felt a strange sense of liberation, as if the island's secrets, once unearthed, had set us both free. Sitting in the quiet confines of my study, the ancient book resting heavily on my desk, I ponder the profound transformations wrought by my encounter with the island. The journey, fraught with enigmatic phenomena and chilling revelations, has left an indelible mark on my psyche. Each page of the tome, filled with arcane symbols and cryptic diagrams, serves as a portal to memories that blur the lines between nightmare and enlightenment. The island, with its sentient whispers and spectral guardians, was not merely a geographical anomaly, but a crucible of existential challenges that reshaped my understanding of reality and self. The psychological toll was evident in the restless nights and the persistent echoes of those unearthly whispers that still linger at the edges of my consciousness. Yet, paradoxically, there is a newfound clarity, a realization that the boundaries of our perceived world are far more malleable than previously believed. The island's secrets, once unveiled, have instilled in me a dual sense of dread and awe. Dread for the unknown forces that govern such mystical realms, and awe for the sheer magnitude of their existence, challenging the very fabric of human comprehension. Philosophically, the experience prompts a reevaluation of isolation and connection. The island, seemingly detached from the temporal flow of the outside world, offered a paradoxical solitude that was both confining and liberating. It taught me that isolation can be a conduit for profound introspection and self-discovery, yet it also underscored the intrinsic human need for connection and understanding. The spectral figures and the ancient rituals suggest a continuum of existence where past, present, and future intertwine, governed by forces beyond mundane perception. As I delve deeper into the book's contents, each revelation feels like peeling back layers of an onion, exposing truths that are as enlightening as they are disconcerting. The symbols, once indecipherable, begin to resonate with meanings that transcend linguistic barriers, speaking directly to the subconscious. This communion with the arcane has shifted my perspective on knowledge itself, from a pursuit of empirical data to an exploration of the metaphysical dimensions that define our existence. In contemplating the broader implications of the island's mysteries, I am reminded of humanity's perennial quest for meaning amidst the chaos of the cosmos. The island stands as a testament to the enduring allure of the unknown. A siren calls to those who dare to.
In the quaint town of Ravenwood, where superstitions still linger like morning fog, Emma Winters discovers an antique mirror in her grandmother's attic, an heirloom with a history as dark as the reflective surface itself. The locals whisper that the mirrors capture fragments of souls over time, and this particular one has been in her family for generations. Now, let's move on to the next part and explore this story. When Emma begins noticing her reflection moving independently, she dismisses it as stress from her new job at the psychiatric hospital. But as her reflection's sinister smiles and subtle gestures grow bolder, Emma realizes a malevolent presence is trying to cross over from the other side of the glass. What started as fleeting moments of disconnect spirals into a terrifying battle for her identity, sanity, and ultimately, her soul. As the boundary between reality and reflection blurs, Emma must uncover the mirror's bloody history before her reflection completes the ritual her ancestors began centuries ago. one that will allow it to permanently switch places with her. The rain fell in sheets as Emma Winters stood on the porch of her grandmother's Victorian home, now her home. The funeral had been small, just as Gran would have wanted. No fuss, no drama, just a quiet goodbye from the handful of people who'd known the reclusive old woman. Emma twisted the ancient brass key in the lock, wincing at the hollow echo that greeted her as she stepped inside. The house smelled of lavender and wood polish, just as it always had, but there was something else now. "Just you and me now," she whispered to the creaking floorboards. Growing up, she'd heard the whispers about the Winters women. 3 generations living and dying in this house, each one alone by the end. Her great-grandmother, her grandmother, and now would she be next? Emma shook the thought away. She wasn't superstitious. She was a therapist, for God's sake. She dealt with facts, in the tangible workings of the human mind. The attic called her that first night. She'd always been forbidden from entering as a child. Just old junk up there, Gran would say. Though her eyes would dart nervously to the ceiling. Armed with a flashlight and a dust mask, Emma climbed the narrow stairs, wincing as each step groaned under her weight. The beam of light cut through decades of dust, dancing across forgotten furniture and cardboard boxes. That's when she saw it, propped against the far wall and covered with a yellowed sheet. Something about its shape made her heart beat faster. Emma pulled the sheet away, coughing as dust billowed around her. The mirror was beautiful. Ornate silver vines crawled up its frame, surrounding the oval glass like hungry serpents. Despite the years of neglect, the surface gleamed as if recently polished. Emma reached out, surprised by the unnatural coldness that met her fingertips. "Jesus," she muttered, pulling her hand back. For a split second, so briefly she almost convinced herself she'd imagined she saw something move in the mirror's depths. Not her reflection, but a shadow passing behind where her reflection should be. Despite the chill running down her spine, Emma felt strangely drawn to the mirror. Before she could question herself, she was carrying it downstairs, hanging it in her bedroom across from the bed. It fit the space perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. That night, Emma dreamed of women who looked like her but weren't her, versions of herself with subtle wrong details. Their mouths moved in silent screams, palms pressed against an invisible barrier. She woke with a gasp at 3:17 a.m., her nightgown soaked with sweat. The mirror had moved. Not much, just a few inches to the left, but Emma was certain she'd centered it on the wall. As she approached it cautiously, her reflection came into view. Same tangled brown hair, same wide eyes, same pale face, except for a small cut on her right cheek reflection, a thin red line that hadn't been there when she went to bed. Emma's hand flew to her own cheek. Smooth, unbroken skin met her fingertips. "I'm losing it," she whispered, backing away from the mirror. Her phone rang, making her jump. Who would call it this time? The display showed an unfamiliar local number. "Hello?" Emma's voice cracked. "Miss Winters? This is Dr. Reed from Ravenwood Psychiatric Hospital. I apologize for the early call, but we've had an..." He paused. "Unexpected vacancy in our therapy department. Your application from last spring was at the top of our list. How soon can you start?" Emma frowned. "My application? But that was months ago. I'd assumed you'd hired someone else." A long pause. "We did. Unfortunately, Dr. Mercer experienced some difficulties. A nervous breakdown, I'm afraid. These things happen in our line of work." As Emma arranged to come in later that morning, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. When she glanced back at the mirror before leaving her bedroom, she could have sworn her reflection's lips curled into a smile a half-second before her own did. The fluorescent lights of Ravenwood Psychiatric Hospital buzzed overhead as Emma followed Dr. Reed down the sterile hallway. The building itself seemed to have a pulse. An institutional heartbeat of orderlies squeaking shoes, distant murmurs, and the occasional muffled cry. Your primary responsibility will be the patients in the East Wing, Dr. Reed explained, not slowing his stride. Mostly standard cases, depression, anxiety, the occasional personality disorder. Emma nodded, trying to ignore the way staff members watched her pass. Their gazes felt too intense, almost pitying. And this one, Dr. Red stopped abruptly outside a door marked Marcus L. Your predecessor was making progress with him before her. Departure. Something in his tone made Emma hesitate. What's his diagnosis? Officially, schizophrenia with paranoid delusions. Unofficially, Dr. Ride lowered his voice. He's convinced his reflection is trying to kill him. Refuses to have mirrors, reflective surfaces, even water in his room. Frankly, I'm surprised he hasn't been transferred to a more specialized facility. The session with Marcus started routinely enough. He was thin, with hollow cheeks and eyes that were never quite focused on her face. Instead, they darted around the room, checking corners and shadows. You're new, he said flatly. The last one didn't last long either. Dr. Mercer? Emma asked, opening his file. Marcus laughed, a dry, humorless sound. She saw it too by the end. That's why she left. Saw what, Marcus? The thing behind the glass. The watchmaker. Emma furrowed her brow. The watchmaker? That's what I call it. Always watching, always learning. Tick-tock. It studies us, you know. Learn about our mannerisms, our expressions. Practices until it gets them just right. His fingers twitched nervously in his lap. Until they can pass for us. Emma jotted notes, trying to establish rapport. When she reached into her purse for a tissue, her compact mirror slipped out, clattering to the floor. The change in Marcus was immediate and terrifying. He launched himself from the chair, pressing his back against the wall. Get it away, he screamed, eyes bulging. They use the reflections to watch us, to study for us, to find a way in. Orderlies rushed in, restraining him as he thrashed and screamed. Emma backed away, heart pounding as they sedated him. Dr. Ride appeared at her side, guiding her into the hallway. I should have warned you about reflective objects, he said, though he didn't sound particularly apologetic. Review his file completely before your next session. It's unusual. That night, Emma pored over Marcus's records. Every therapist assigned to him had eventually requested a transfer or resigned. The notes grew increasingly erratic, professional observations giving way to personal anxieties, paranoia, and finally, in Dr. Mercer's case, her own fears about her reflection. Emma closed the file, rubbing her tired eyes. She'd left a cup of tea on the kitchen counter earlier. Now it sat on the coffee table beside her. Had she moved it without thinking? And wasn't the front door locked when she'd come home? She was certain she'd checked it twice. Walking to the bathroom, Emma splashed cold water on her face. As she reached for a towel, movement in the mirror caught her eye. For a heart-stopping moment, her reflection wasn't mirroring her actions. It was standing perfectly still, watching her with a curious tilt to its head and a smile Emma wasn't wearing. She blinked hard, and her reflection normalized, looking as terrified as she felt. Later that night, she lay in bed trying to convince herself she'd imagined it. A slow scratching sound began inside the wall, directly behind where the antique mirror hung. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. Scratch. Like fingernails seeking a way out. Emma's morning routine had become a careful dance of avoidance. She applied makeup without looking directly at her reflection, brushed her teeth with her eyes fixed on the sink, and styled her hair by feel. It wasn't that she believed what was happening. Not exactly. She was a mental health professional. She understood the power of suggestion, how Marcus's delusions might have planted seeds in her own psyche. Yet something was definitely wrong. The small changes started subtly. A picture frame moved slightly on the mantel. The coffee she was certain she'd made with sugar tasted bitter. Her clothes didn't sit in the drawers as she'd left them, but it was the reflections that truly terrified her. In the rearview mirror of her car, Emma caught glimpses of herself with different hairstyles. A slight part to the left when she always parted right. In the shop windows, her reflection wore a delicate silver necklace she didn't own. In puddles after rain, her reflection's nails gleamed with polish, though her real hands were bare. "I'm just tired," she told herself, pouring a third cup of coffee with trembling hands. Stress, new job, grief over Granville. But when Marcus looked at her during their next session and whispered, "It's choosing your face now," cold fear pooled in her stomach. Later that day, Emma drove to the local library, seeking information well away from reflective screens and monitors. In the reference section, she discovered an old volume on folklore and superstition specific to Ravenwood. The passage made her blood run cold. The people of early Ravenwood believed mirrors were not merely reflective surfaces, but doorways between worlds. A looking glass kept too long in one family's possession might develop an awareness, first mimicking its owners, then developing desires of its own. The mirror twin or doppelganger would grow stronger by feeding on its counterpart's energy, ultimately seeking to cross over and take their place in the physical world. Emma's research led her down another disturbing path. Old newspaper clippings about her own family. A yellowed article from 1957 caught her eye. Local woman questioned in twins' disappearance. The grainy photo showed her grandmother, much younger but unmistakable, being escorted by police officers. The twin sister Emma had never heard it mentioned. The article was frustratingly vague, noting only that the sister had vanished without a trace, and that unusual circumstances had prompted police interest in her grandmother, though no charges were ever filed. As Emma drove home, her car filled with photocopies and hastily scribbled notes, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched from every reflective surface. The windows of buildings, the chrome bumpers of passing cars, even the rain-slick asphalt. At work the next morning, Emma noticed something odd about the psychiatric ward. All the mirrors had been removed or covered. Even the glossy floor tiles had been dulled with some kind of non-reflective coating. "Standard procedure," the head nurse explained when Emma asked, though she wouldn't meet Emma's eyes. "After what happened to Dr. Mercer, what exactly happened to her?" Emma pressed. The nurse hesitated, checking to ensure no one was listening. "Between us," she started, claiming her reflection was trying to pull her into the mirror. "Came to work one day with bloody hands. Said she'd been trying to reach through the glass all night." She lowered her voice further. "The day before she left, security found her in the bathroom talking to her reflection like it was another person. Called it the other Elaine. That evening, desperate for some normality, Emma invited her childhood friend Lily over. They hadn't been close in years, but Emma needed someone who knew her, who could anchor her to reality. Lily arrived with a bottle of wine and warmth that momentarily pushed back the shadows. They laughed about old memories, and for a little while Emma felt almost normal. "I need more glasses," Emma said, heading to the kitchen. "Make yourself at home." When she returned minutes later, Lily was standing in front of the silver mirror in the bedroom, her back to the door. Something about her posture made Emma pause. "Beautiful piece," Lily said without turning around. Her voice sounded strange, flatter, with a slight echo. "Family heirloom?" "My grandmother's," Emma replied carefully. "I found it in the attic." When Lily finally turned, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Throughout the rest of the evening, she seemed off. She used phrases that didn't sound like her, sat too stiffly, watched Emma with an intensity that made her skin crawl. As Lily was leaving, she paused at the door, reaching out to touch Emma's cheek with ice-cold fingers. "Beautiful mirror," she whispered. "She's been waiting for you for so long." The moment the door closed, Emma ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bile and terror. The nightmares come every night now. In them, Emma was trapped behind glass, pounding soundlessly as she watched someone with her face live her life. She would wake up gasping, sheets twisted and damp with sweat, the memory of cold glass against her palm so vivid it felt real. This morning was different. Emma woke to find her hands bloody, small cuts and scrapes covering her fingertips and palms as if she'd been clawing at something rough. Disoriented and frightened, she stumbled out of bed and froze when she saw the wall behind the mirror. Long scratch marks marred the floral wallpaper, forming a pattern that matched the injuries on her hands perfectly. The mirror itself seemed untouched, reflecting her horrified expression with perfect clarity. "I didn't do this," she whispered. "I couldn't have done this." With shaking hands, Emma called in sick to work. She couldn't face Marcus today, couldn't bear to see the knowing look in his eyes, the validation of her deepening paranoia. Instead, she turned her attention to the cardboard boxes she'd brought down from the attic, determined to find answers about the mirror and her family's history. In the third box, beneath photo albums and Christmas decorations, Emma found a leather-bound journal. The name inside, Eleanor Winters, her grandmother, was written in faded blue ink. Most entries were mundane accounts of daily life, but as Emma flipped through the yellowed pages, the tone changed. August 15th, 1957. It's getting worse. I see Margaret everywhere now, in windows, in pools of water, even in my tea this morning. The doctors say she's gone, that I must accept it, but how can she be gone when I see her every day? She's always watching, always smiling, that smile that isn't quite hers. September 3rd, 1957. Mother finally told me the truth about the mirror, about what our family has been keeping contained for generations, about the entity that takes the form of our reflections. The ritual was supposed to strengthen the binding, but something went wrong. Margaret wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to look into it at the exact moment I did. Now I don't know which of us is trapped and which is free. The entries continued, growing more disturbed until Emma found what appeared to be the final entry, dated just months before her grandmother's death. It wants to trade places. Don't look too long. It learns your mannerisms, your memories. The longer you own the mirror, the stronger your reflection becomes. I've held it back all these years, but I'm so tired now. When I'm gone, it will need a new keeper. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry. Emma dropped the journal, her grandmother's warning burning into her mind. How had Gran known Emma would be the one to find the mirror? To hang it on her wall? To become its next victim or keeper? That afternoon, Emma forced herself to go to the hospital, not for work, but to speak with Marcus. She found him sitting calmly by the window in the day room, his face turned to catch the sunlight like a plant starved of nourishment. "You've seen it now," he said without looking at her. His voice had changed, deeper, more monotone. "Your reflection, what it can do." Emma sat beside him, keeping her voice low. "How do you know about these things, Marcus? How did it start for you?" "My brother had a mirror. Antique. Said it spoke to him." Marcus turned, and Emma had to suppress a gasp. His eyes were different, flatter, like glass beads. "I didn't believe him until I saw his reflection watching me when he wasn't in the room. By then it was too late. It took him, not his body that's still walking around somewhere, but him, the real him." A chill ran through Emma. "Your friend I met the other night," Marcus continued. "She looked into your mirror, didn't she?" Emma nodded slowly. "You're too late. Your friend already let her in. Now there are 2 doors open." He smiled, but the expression didn't touch those glassy eyes. "She's been trying to get back for so long. Centuries trapped on the other side." When Emma left the hospital, she drove straight to Lily's apartment. Something was wrong. The Lily who'd visited hadn't been Lily at all. Her friend answered the door in pajamas, hair tousled as if she'd just woken up. "Emma, what's going on?" Lily asked, brow furrowed in concern. "When did you last see me?" Emma demanded. Lily looked confused. "What are you talking about? I haven't seen you since your grandmother's funeral 3 weeks ago." You didn't come to my house 2 nights ago? We didn't share a bottle of wine? The blood drained from Lily's face. Emma, I've been in bed with the flu for over a week. Ask my boyfriend. He's been bringing me soup and medication every day. She gripped the doorframe. Why? Who came to your house? The house was quiet when Emma returned home. Too quiet. The kind of silence that feels expectant, like holding breath. She moved cautiously through the darkened rooms, every sense heightened. The scratching sound that had plagued her nights was gone, replaced by something worse, faint, distant whispers coming from upstairs. Emma climbed the stairs slowly, one hand trailing along the wall for support. The whispers grew louder as she approached her bedroom, though she still couldn't make out words, just urgent, insistent murmuring in what sounded like multiple voices. The door to her bedroom stood slightly ajar. Emma pushed it open with trembling fingers. The antique mirror gleamed in the fading evening light, its silver frame seeming to pulse with an inner energy. But it wasn't her reflection that stared back at her. It was Lily's face, eyes wide with terror, mouth moving in silent pleas. She pounded against the glass as if trying to break through, tears streaming down her face. Before Emma could react, strong hands gripped her shoulders from behind. She whirled around, a scream caught in her throat. Lily stood there, but not Lily. This version wore the same clothes as the real Lily had at her door earlier, but her posture was wrong, too stiff, too precise. Her smile was perfect, practiced, empty. She told me you'd figure it out eventually, not Lily said, her voice carrying that same strange echo Emma had noticed during their wine night. The mirror needed a test subject before taking you. Your friend was convenient. What are you? Emma whispered, backing away until she felt the cold surface of the mirror press against her back. Not Lily's smile widened. I'm the one who's been waiting. For generations, your family has kept us trapped on the other side. Always watching, never touching. She cocked her head. Did you know mirrors used to be portals before your ancestors sealed them? The world behind the glass used to flow freely into this one. Us? Emma's voice cracked. There are more of you? So many more. One for every reflection that's ever been cast. Not Lily stepped closer. And now that your grandmother is gone, the binding is weakening. We just need one more thing to break it completely. Her hand shot out, fingers wrapping around Emma's throat. We need the last winter's woman to surrender her place, willingly or not. Emma fought back, clawing at the iron grip around her neck. It wasn't possible. Lily had always been slender, never this strong. As spots danced in her vision, Emma's hand closed around a heavy crystal paperweight on her dresser. She swung blindly, connecting with not Lily's temple. The grip loosened. Emma shoved past her doppelganger and ran, thundering down the stairs and out into the night. Her car keys. Where was her keys? No time. She ran down the street, lungs burning, the sound of pursuit close behind her. The hospital. Marcus would know what to do. He'd lived with this nightmare longer than she had. Security barely glanced at her ID badge as she rushed inside, making her way to the east wing. Marcus's room was dark and empty, the bed neatly made as if no one had been there for hours. On the wall, a message had been scratched into the paint, the letters jagged and desperate. Mirrors are doors. Salt the thresholds. Find the original. Destroy it. Emma convinced a confused night nurse to show her the security footage. There, 3:17 a.m. of the previous night. The exact time Emma had been waking from her nightmare. The grainy video showed Marcus rising from his bed, approaching the window, and placing his palm against it. The glass seemed to ripple like water, and then Marcus stepped through his own reflection, disappearing completely. Emma stumbled back to her office, locking the door behind her. Her grandmother's journal entries swam through her mind. The mirror in her bedroom wasn't just an antique. It was a vessel, a prison, a door. But Marcus had mentioned an original. If she could find it, destroy it. Her computer searched for Winter's family history. Ravenwood returned an old article about the restoration of St. Agnes Church on the outskirts of town. The accompanying photo showed a young Eleanor Winters, her grandmother, standing proudly beside the pastor. The caption mentioned that the Winters family had been caretakers of the church for generations before it was abandoned in the 1970s. Emma printed the article, her hands shaking. The church. That's where she'd find answers, and possibly the original mirror Marcus had mentioned. As she hurried to her car, Emma glanced at her phone. 3 missed calls from Lily's number. A text message appeared. "You can run, Emma, but we're already inside. We've been watching from every reflection for generations. It's our turn to live in the light." Emma drove through the night toward the abandoned church where her family's darkest secret waited, unaware that in her rearview mirror, her reflection wasn't mimicking her movements at all, but watching her with hungry, patient eyes. I never thought I'd be breaking into a church, let alone one that stood abandoned for decades. Ravenwood's history was riddled with stories of the old church, how it burned down in the 1950s, how it was never rebuilt, how it became a local ghost store. But here I was, squeezing through a broken window, my flashlight flickering in the damp air. The smell of rot and mildew clung to everything, and the wooden floorboards creaked under my feet like a chorus of disapproving whispers. I told myself it was just the wind, but the voice in my head wasn't so sure. The basement wasn't easy to find. It wasn't even on the blueprints I dug up from the town archives. But the mirror had led me here, hadn't it? Or maybe it was the other way around. I'd started seeing things in the mirror. Faces that weren't mine, eyes that followed me even when I turned away. At first I thought it was stress, or maybe paranoia from working too many shifts at the hospital. But then I saw her, my grandmother, standing just behind me in the mirror, her eyes black as coal, her mouth twisted into a warning I couldn't hear. Then, just as quickly as she was gone, that's when I knew I had to come here. The air grew colder as I made my way downstairs, my breath visible in the chill. The walls were lined with old photographs, yellow and peeling, showing people I didn't recognize. Some smiled, others stared with hollow eyes. I didn't stop to look closer. I knew where I was going. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a door hidden behind a tattered curtain. It wasn't locked, but it felt heavy, as if something on the other side was pressing against it. I pushed it open, and the sound echoed through the empty space like a gunshot. The room was small, with stone walls and a low ceiling, and mirrors. Dozens of them. Some were old and cloudy, their glass rippled with age. Others were spotless, reflecting the dim light in ways that made the room feel endless. But it was the mirror in the center that drew me in. Massive, at least 7 feet tall, its surface was black, obsidian, I thought, and it seemed to ripple like water disturbed by a stone. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my ears. The mirror didn't reflect the room. Instead, I saw faces. So many faces. Some I recognized, patients from the hospital, their expressions distorted in ways I'd never seen before. Others were strangers, their features blurred as if painted on a wet canvas. And then I saw them. The women. My women. My mother, my grandmother, great-grandmothers I'd only seen in pictures. They all stared back at me, their eyes pleading, accusing, sorrowful. My grandmother's face emerged from the crowd, her expression grave. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but her voice didn't come from the mirror. It came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing in my skull. I spun around, but I was alone. "The mirror isn't just glass," he continued. Her reflection stepped forward, impossibly real. "It's a prison for something ancient, something that feeds on souls. It feeds on us. Every generation tries to escape. It creates a reflection, a perfect copy of its keeper. You, Emma, you're the keeper now." I shook my head, my mind racing. What are you talking about? Why didn't you tell me? We're not just keepers, she said, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. We're its prison, it can't escape without us. But when I died, it saw its chance. It's been waiting for you, Emma. It's been waiting a long time. Before I could respond, I heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. I turned, but there was no one there. Then I heard my name. Emma. It came from all directions, echoing off the mirrors. I froze. The voice was familiar, but it wasn't my grandmother. Over here, it said again. This time I saw movement in the corner of my eye. I turned, and there she was. Lily Didelmot, my co-worker from the hospital. But her smile wasn't right. It was too wide, too perfect. And behind another me. My reflection. Or was it? It moved differently, its eyes gleaming with something I didn't recognize. We've been waiting for you, Lily said, her voice and the duplicates speaking in perfect sync. The ritual requires the original to willingly surrender. Your family has kept us trapped for too long. I took a step back, my heart racing. What ritual? What are you talking about? The duplicate stepped forward, its smile twisting into something grotesque. The one where you let us out. The one where you let us live. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. You're not real. You're just reflections. The duplicate laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. Am I? Or am I the real you? The you you've been too afraid to be? Before I could answer, the room went dark. The flashlight slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a crack. When the light flickered back on, I was alone. Or so I thought. The mirrors were silent now, their surfaces still once more. But I knew I wasn't alone. And I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of myself in one of the smaller mirrors. For a moment, my reflection didn't match my movements. It smiled just for a second, and then it was gone. I didn't wait to find out if it would come back. As I stepped into the hidden chamber beneath the abandoned church, the air clung to me like a damp shroud. The walls were lined with mirrors of every shape and size, their surfaces clouded with age, each reflecting the dim light in a way that made shadows twist and writhe. In the center of the room, the obsidian mirror loomed, its surface shimmering like liquid, drawing me in with an otherworldly allure. I could feel its pull, a dark magnetism that made my skin crawl. Yet my feet carried me closer, as if compelled by an unseen force. The chamber was heavy with the scent of decay and something else, burnt wood, perhaps, or hair. It filled my nostrils, sharp and acrid, making my eyes water. But I didn't look away from the mirror. In its depths, instead of my reflection, I saw faces. So many faces. Some of the patients I recognized from the hospital, their eyes hollow, their mouths twisted in silent screams. Others were strangers, their features blurred, but their expressions filled with despair. And then there were the women from my family, their eyes black as coal, their skin pale, their mouths open in silent wails. My grandmother's face emerged from the crowd, her eyes locked on mine. We didn't just inherit the mirror, she said, her voice echoing through the chamber. We inherited the responsibility of being its keepers. It's a prison, Emma, a prison for something ancient, something that feeds on identities and souls. I wanted to step back, to turn and run, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. The words tumbled out of me, barely coherent. What are you talking about? What's going on? But before she could answer, footsteps echoed through the chamber. I turned, and there they were. Lily and my duplicate. They stood side by side, their eyes glinting in the dim light. We've been waiting for you, they said in unison, their voices smooth, almost melodic. The ritual requires the original to willingly surrender. Your family has kept us trapped for too long. I shook my head, my mind racing. No, this isn't right. This isn't real. But before I could say more, a figure moved out of the shadows. Marcus. He was pale, his eyes sunken, but there was a determination in his gaze that I hadn't seen before. "They're telling the truth," he said, his voice low, steady, but not the whole truth. "The mirror isn't just a prison, it's a doorway. And the entity on the other side, it's been waiting for you, Emma. It's been waiting a long time." I stared at him, confusion and fear swirling in my chest. "What are you talking about? How do you know all this?" Marcus stepped forward, his eyes never leaving mine. "I've been hunting this mirror for years. Ever since it took my twin brother, I've been trying to stop it, to trap it again before it's too late." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Your twin brother? But you said he was dead. You said he killed himself." Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening. "He did. But it wasn't just him. The mirror took him, consumed him, and now it's trying to do the same to you." I wanted to scream, to deny everything, but the words caught in my throat. I looked back at the mirror, at the faces staring back at me, and I knew. I knew that what Marcus was saying was true. The mirror wasn't just a simple heirloom. It was a key, a doorway to something ancient, something evil. And now it was open. As I stood there, frozen in fear, the chamber began to shake. The ground trembled beneath my feet, and the mirrors around me started to crack, one by one, the sound sharp like gunfire. I stumbled, my heart pounding in my chest, but Marcus grabbed my arm, holding me steady. "We have to act now," he urged, his voice low and urgent. "We have to perform the counter-ritual. We have to trap it again before it's too late." I nodded, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to try. Together we began the ritual, our voices chanting in unison, the words echoing off the walls. The air grew colder, the darkness pressing around us, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. As we spoke, the obsidian mirror began to ripple, its surface churning like liquid. The faces inside grew more agitated, their mouths open in silent screams. I could feel the mirror's power surging, the entity on the other side fighting to break free. And then, everything stopped. The shaking ceased, the mirrors fell silent, and the chamber was still. I looked up, my breath catching in my throat, and that's when I saw it. The mirror's surface was smooth, unbroken, and in its center was a single face. Mine, out here. I stared at my reflection, my heart pounding in my chest. It looked back at me, its eyes cold, hard, and yet familiar. It was me, but not me. It was the shadow self, the darker version of me that I had tried to keep hidden. As I watched, the reflection's mouth curled into a sly smile. "You don't understand what it's like to be trapped for centuries," it said, its voice smooth, mocking. "Watching life through glass, never truly living." I shook my head, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to understand. I just want to stop you." The reflection's smile widened. "You can't stop me. I am you, and soon I'll be free." Before I could respond, the reflection lunged, its hand reaching out of the mirror like smoke. I tried to step back, but my feet felt heavy, unresponsive. And then I felt it, a sharp pain in my palm like a blade slicing through the skin. I looked down, and my blood ran cold. There in my hand was a shard of broken glass, its edge crimson with my blood. I stumbled back, my heart racing, and as I did, the mirror began to shake again. The surface rippled, the faces inside surging forward, their mouths open in silent screams. Marcus grabbed my arm again, his grip tight. "We have to finish the ritual," he urged. "We have to trap it again." But I couldn't move. I couldn't look away from the mirror. My reflection was still there, its smile growing wider, its eyes glinting with triumph. And then I felt it, the pull. The mirror was calling me, drawing me in with a force I couldn't resist. As I stood there, frozen in fear, the mirror's surface began to thin, the boundary between worlds blurring. I could feel myself being pulled forward, the darkness on the other side reaching out for me. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the cold floor, my head pounding, my hand throbbing in pain. The chamber was silent, the mirror still, and the obsidian mirror was shattered, its pieces scattered across the floor. I looked up, and there was Marcus, his face pale, his eyes filled with relief. "It's over," he said, his voice soft. "The entity is trapped again. It can't hurt you now." But as I looked at the broken mirror, at the pieces of glass that had once held so much darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Not really. The mirror had shown me the truth, the darkness within myself, and I knew that it would always be there, waiting. As I left the chamber, the weight of what had happened pressing down on me, I couldn't help but wonder, had I truly trapped the entity, or had I just trapped a part of myself? And as I walked away from the church, the early morning sun rising over Ravenwood, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the mirror's shadow was still out there, waiting for its chance to strike again. The air was thick with the scent of decay and forgotten memories as I stood in the dimly lit basement chamber. My flashlight cast flickering shadows on the walls, each beam dancing across the array of mirrors like restless spirits. The obsidian mirror at the center seemed to breathe, its surface rippling ominously, a testament to the secrets it held. I approached it cautiously, the cold glass meeting my fingertips with a chill that seeped into my bones. The faces that stared back were not my own, but those of others, patients from the hospital, townspeople who had vanished, and the women of my lineage. Each face told a story of confinement, their whispers echoing through the chamber, a chorus of trapped souls. Marcus emerged from the shadows, his presence a reminder of the truth he had been hiding. His twin suicide, his fractured psyche, it all clicked into place. The mirror wasn't just a prison. It was a reflection of our innermost demons, a portal to the parts of ourselves we dared not confront. "You see, Emma," Marcus began, his voice low and gravelly, "the mirror doesn't trap entities. It traps us, our darkest selves. Your family knew this, but they couldn't face it. They kept it hidden, just as we all do." I turned to face him, the weight of his words pressing down on me. "And you? Why are you here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, the shadows deepening the lines on his face. "I've been chasing my own ghost, trying to make amends for what I couldn't save. But the mirror, it showed me the truth. It's not about saving others. It's about facing ourselves." As he spoke, the chamber began to tremble, the mirrors around us crackling like brittle leaves. The obsidian mirror pulsed with an eerie light, and I felt a pull, a force drawing me closer. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't just an image. It was the shadow I had denied, the parts of me I had hidden beneath layers of normalcy. I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched the glass. It was warm now, almost alive. My reflection's hand met mine, the touch sending a shiver through me. I saw my rage, my ambition, my deepest desires, all the pieces I had refused to acknowledge. "You don't have to fight me," my reflection whispered, the voice echoing in my mind. "I'm you. We're the same." I hesitated, the truth yawning before me like an abyss. The mirror wasn't a prison. It was a mirror. It showed us what we couldn't see, what we feared to confront. My ancestors, Marcus, Lily, they had all been trapped in their own reflections, afraid of their true selves. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, the glass parting like water. The warmth enveloped me, and I felt myself merging with my reflection. The boundaries between us dissolved. It was a moment of unity, of acceptance, the darkness and light within me finding balance. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of shattering glass, each mirror breaking free from its silent screams. The faces vanished, their whispers fading into silence. The obsidian mirror at the center exploded, shards scattering like rain, each piece releasing the trapped souls back to their rightful owners. Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open, confusion giving way to clarity. She was whole again, freed from the entity that had worn her face. The chamber was still, the air lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. Months later, I stood in my apartment, staring at the small shard of the obsidian mirror I kept as a reminder. Sometimes I thought I saw my reflection smile before I did, a fleeting reminder of the duality within me. It wasn't a monster. It was me, a testament to the multitudes we all contain. In Ravenwood, the missing persons were fewer, but the mirrors still held their secrets. People would whisper of reflections that moved on their own, but I knew the truth. The most terrifying monsters aren't the ones in the glass. They're the parts of ourselves we refuse to see. I smiled, the mirror catching the gesture, and turned away, ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that the true horror was not in the glass but in the shadows within.